Welcome back to Haunted Fears, where nightmares become reality. The Appalachian Mountains hide horrors that defy explanation. People vanish mid-trail, hospitals long abandoned still call out names, and highways trap drivers in endless loops through impossible fog. Tonight, 11 encounters will shatter everything you believe about these ancient hills. Something watches from the hollows, waiting in abandoned towns, lurking beneath reservoir waters. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and join the Haunted Fears horror family, because you won't want to face what's coming alone. Let's dive in. Have you ever wondered what happens in a hospital after the last patient leaves and the lights go out forever? I found out the hard way, and I wish to God I never had. My name's Dustin, and back in 2019, I took a security job at the old Miners Memorial Hospital in Maine, West Virginia. The place had been sitting empty since 2001, just rotting away on the hill above town. Appalachian Regional Healthcare still owned it, and after some kids broke in and started a fire trying to burn old medical records, they finally decided they needed someone watching the property before the county tore it down. That someone was me. $12 an hour to sit in an abandoned hospital overnight, 4 nights a week. Easy money. Or so I thought. The hospital had been built back in the 50s by the Miners Memorial Hospital Association, back when coal was still king, and miners needed somewhere close to go when the mines chewed them up and spit them out. It was a decent-sized place, 4 stories, about 82 beds at its peak. But when the coal money dried up and ARH couldn't keep it afloat anymore, they just locked the doors and walked away. Everything stayed right where it was. Beds, equipment, files, all of it. They took the expensive stuff, sure, but the rest just sat there collecting dust for 18 years. I started in October. The first week was fine, boring even. I'd do my rounds, check the doors and windows, make sure nobody was trying to break in. The building was massive and dark, even with my flashlight, but it was just a building. Old linoleum floors, that hospital smell that never quite goes away even after years of being empty. Rooms full of old furniture covered in sheets. Nothing scary about it during those first nights. The 3rd floor ward was where things started. It was a Tuesday, around 2:30 in the morning. I was doing my usual walkthrough, checking rooms one by one, when I heard it. Footsteps. Not the creaking of an old building settling, but actual footsteps on linoleum. The distinctive squeak of rubber soles like the kind nurses used to wear. They were coming from the far end of the hall near the old nurses' station. I stopped dead. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness ahead, illuminating empty corridor. The footsteps continued, steady and purposeful, getting closer. I could hear them clearly now, the rhythm of someone walking with determination, someone who knew exactly where they were going. But there was nothing there, just empty hall and shadows. Hello? My voice cracked. I cleared my throat and tried again. This is security. Building's closed. You need to leave. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. I stood there for what felt like forever, my heart hammering, flashlight pointed down that empty corridor. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. The sound of a pen clicking. Once, twice, 3 times. It was coming from the nurses' station where I'd just been 5 minutes ago. I walked back slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run. The nurses' station was a big curved desk, still had charts and papers scattered across it from 2001. My flashlight swept over the surface. Everything looked the same as it had minutes ago, except for one thing. One of the patient charts was open now, sitting in the middle of the desk. I knew for a fact it had been closed when I passed by. I picked it up with shaking hands. The chart was for a patient named Eileen Holloway, admitted September 12, 2001, for pneumonia complications. But that wasn't what made me drop the chart and back away. It was the date on the top page, written in fresh blue ink, October 29th, 2019, tomorrow's date, and below it, in the same fresh handwriting, a single word, Critical. I got out of that floor fast, went down to the first floor security office, locked the door, and told myself I'd imagined it. Stress, lack of sleep, old building making noises. I spent the rest of the shift in that office, watching the security monitors. Most of them didn't work, but 3 still did, covering the main entrance, the second floor hallway, and part of the third floor. Around 4 a.m., movement on the third floor camera caught my eye. The image was grainy, black and white, but I could see someone moving past the camera. A figure in what looked like old-style nurse's uniform, the kind with the white cap and everything. She was pushing a wheelchair, and I swear I could see someone sitting in it, though the image was too unclear to make out details. I watched as she disappeared from frame. My phone was in my hand before I even realized I'd picked it up. I called my supervisor, Wayne, woke him up at 4 in the morning, told him everything. He was quiet for a long moment after I finished. "Dustin," he finally said, "you're the 4th guard we've put in that building. The other 3 all quit within 2 weeks. They all reported the same thing. Third floor, footsteps, charts appearing. One of them claimed he saw a nurse pushing a wheelchair with a patient who had no face." He paused. "I didn't tell you because I needed someone to actually stay long enough for the county inspection next month. You staying or quitting?" I should have quit right then. I should have walked out and never looked back. But I needed the money. My daughter Oakland's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves, and jobs in Man were scarce. So I stayed. The next night, I brought a camera. One of those digital ones that timestamps everything. I also brought my cousin Leighton, who was between jobs and willing to sit in the first floor office while I did my rounds. Having someone else in the building made me feel better, at least a little. I started on the first floor, working my way up. First and second floors were quiet, nothing out of place. I took pictures of everything anyway, building my documentation. When I got to the third floor, I noticed the temperature drop immediately. It had to be 20 degrees colder than the floor below. My breath came out in clouds. The nurse's station had another chart open. This one was for a patient named Briar Montgomery, admitted October 15th, 2001, for heart failure. The date at the top was today's date, October 30th, 2019. The status, deceased. I took a picture of it. The camera flash illuminated the station for a split second, and in that brief moment of brightness, I saw her, standing behind the desk, just on the other side. A woman in a nurse's uniform, her face pale and drawn, eyes hollow. She was looking right at me. The flash faded. Darkness returned. I stood there, frozen, my finger still on the camera button. I pressed it again. Flash. She was closer now, standing at the edge of the desk. Flash. She was coming around the side. Flash. She was reaching toward me, her hand outstretched, fingers long and white. I ran. I don't remember making the decision to run, my body just did it. I hit the stairwell door so hard it slammed against the wall, and I took the stairs 3 at a time. Behind me, I could hear those footsteps again, faster now, chasing me. The sound of wheels squeaking, like a wheelchair or a gurney being pushed at high speed. I burst into the first floor office where Leighton was sitting. He jumped up, startled. "What the hell, man? You look like you've seen—" "We're leaving," I cut him off. "Now." But the office door wouldn't open. We'd locked it from the inside, but now the knob wouldn't turn. Leighton pulled on it, threw his shoulder against it. Nothing. Through the small window in the door, I could see the first floor hallway, empty and dark. Then the lights came on. Not all of them, just the emergency lighting, those dim green bulbs that run on backup power. They shouldn't have worked. The building's been without power for 18 years. But there they were, glowing sickly green up and down the corridor. The intercom system crackled to life. Static at first, then a voice. Female, professional, distant. "Dr. Ahmed to radiology. Dr. Ahmed to radiology. Code blue, third floor, room 317. Code blue, third floor, room 317. More voices joined in, overlapping, all calling out codes and departments. Pharmacy needed in ICU. Housekeeping to second floor. Dr. Quincy, you have a call on line 3. It was chaos, like the hospital was full again, fully operational, except we could see it was still empty. Then the announcement stopped. One final voice came through, clear and cold. Security to the morgue. Security to the morgue. Drawer 7 is open. Please investigate. Leighton looked at me, his face white. Where's the morgue? Basement, I whispered. I've never been down there. They told me it was sealed off. The office door clicked open. Just swung inward, like someone had unlocked it from the other side. The hallway beyond was still lit by those green emergency lights, casting everything in an underwater glow. We could see the elevator at the far end. As we watched, it dinged. The doors opened, empty. We should go, Leighton said. Out the front door, right now. We tried. God, we tried. But every exit we reached was locked. And not just locked, but sealed, like the doors had been welded shut. Windows wouldn't break, even when Leighton threw a chair at one. The glass didn't even crack. It was like the building itself had decided we weren't leaving. The intercom crackled again. Last call. Security to the morgue. Drawer 7 requires immediate attention. We went to the basement. What choice did we have? The stairwell leading down was narrow and steep, the green emergency lights barely penetrating the darkness below. It smelled different down there. Not just the musty smell of the upper floors, but something chemical, something that made my eyes water. The morgue was at the end of a long corridor. The door was standing open, and inside, more of those green lights illuminated rows of metal drawers built into the wall. Drawer 7, third row from the bottom, was pulled out about 6 inches. I didn't want to look. Everything in me screamed not to look, but my hand reached out anyway, grabbed the drawer handle, pulled it open. Inside was a body bag, old and stained. The tag attached to it read, Eileen Holloway. The date of death, October 29th, 2019. Tomorrow. That's impossible, Leighton breathed. That date hasn't even happened yet. The body bag moved. Not much, just a slight shift, like something inside had taken a breath. Then the zipper started to open, slowly, tooth by tooth, moving on its own from the inside. We ran again, back up the stairs, through the corridors, not even caring where we were going anymore. The intercom was going crazy now, dozens of voices all talking at once, calling out procedures and codes and names. The lights were flickering, emergency bulbs burning too bright and then dying out completely. We ended up on the 3rd floor. I don't even know how. The nurse's station was fully lit now, and I could see her clearly. The nurse. She was standing there with a clipboard, writing something down, completely calm, while everything around us was chaos. Behind her, lining the hallway, were others. Patients in gowns, sitting in wheelchairs, or standing with IV poles, all of them watching us with empty eyes. You shouldn't be here, the nurse said without looking up. Her voice was flat, matter of fact. Visiting hours are over. These patients need their rest. We're leaving, I managed to say. We just want to leave. She finally looked up at us. Her face was wrong somehow, like I was seeing it through water. You can leave when the shift ends. 7 a.m., just like everyone else. She checked her watch. 2 more hours. Those were the longest 2 hours of my life. We sat in the hallway, backs against the wall, watching as nurses I couldn't quite focus on moved between rooms, as doctors with distorted faces made their rounds, as patients who didn't quite look human were wheeled past us. None of them acknowledged us after that initial encounter. It was like we'd become part of the building, part of whatever this place was now. At exactly 7 a.m. the lights went out. All of them, all at once. The building fell silent. Completely, utterly silent. When I turned on my flashlight, we were alone again. Just empty corridors and dust-covered equipment. The exits opened without any trouble. I quit that day. So did Leighton. Wayne didn't seem surprised. The building was demolished 3 months later, January 2020. I heard they had trouble with it. that the wrecking crew refused to work at night, that equipment kept failing for no reason. But eventually, they tore it down. I still have the pictures from that night. Most of them are blurred or corrupted, but there's one that came out clear. It's the shot of the nurse's station, the one I took right before I saw her. In the background, barely visible, you can see them. Dozens of figures in patient gowns and medical staff uniforms, all standing in the corridor, all facing the camera. All of them with Eileen Holloway's face. I don't work security anymore. Can't bring myself to step into an empty building after dark. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. The squeak of rubber soles on linoleum, the click of a pen, the distant sound of an intercom calling codes to empty rooms. And I wonder if some places never really close, if some shifts never really end. If you ever find yourself driving through Man, West Virginia, you'll see where the hospital used to stand. Just an empty lot now, overgrown with weeds. But sometimes, people report seeing lights in windows that aren't there anymore. Hearing voices calling out medical codes from a building that doesn't exist. The hospital may be gone, but I don't think it's empty. Whatever was on that third floor, whatever kept those charts updated and those drawers warm, it's still there. Still working its shift. Still waiting for the next person who wanders in after dark, looking for easy money and finding something else entirely. Don't make the mistake I did. Some jobs aren't worth any amount of pay, and some buildings should stay locked, even after they're torn down. If you enjoyed this story from the Haunted Fears horror family, make sure you stay with us because the horror is just beginning. The next story will take you somewhere even darker, somewhere you might recognize, somewhere close to home. Imagine driving the same stretch of road over and over, unable to escape, while your GPS tells you you're in 5 different places at once. That's what happened to me on Highway 421, and I'm still not sure I ever really left. My name's Quincy, and I've been driving trucks for 23 years. I've hauled everything from furniture to livestock across 48 states, driven through blizzards, sandstorms, fog so thick you couldn't see your own hood. I've seen it all, or at least I thought I had, but nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on that October night in the Kentucky mountains. I was running a load of auto parts from Knoxville to Lexington, taking Highway 421 through the Daniel Boone National Forest, because it shaved an hour off my time. It's a lonely road, especially at night. Twists and turns through the mountains, barely any towns, just trees and darkness for miles. I'd driven it maybe 50 times before, never had a problem. It was around 3 a.m. when I passed mile marker 38. I remember it specifically because I was calculating my ETA and checking my distance. The road was empty, hadn't seen another vehicle in over 30 minutes. Just me, my headlights, and the endless white lines. The radio was playing some late-night talk show, guy discussing conspiracy theories about the Appalachian Mountains. I wasn't really listening. 10 minutes later, I passed mile marker 38 again. Same marker, same exact spot. I noticed it because of the distinctive dead tree next to it, split by lightning into a perfect Y shape. I figured I'd misread it the first time, that it was actually 40. Or maybe I'd gotten turned around somehow, though the road had been straight for the last few miles. Another 10 minutes. Mile marker 38 again. Same dead tree. Same faded paint on the marker post. This time I stopped the truck, got out, walked right up to it and touched it. Definitely a 38. The tree was real, bark rough under my fingers. Everything was exactly as it had been 20 minutes ago. I checked my GPS. It showed me on Highway 421, but the location dot kept jumping. 1 second I was near Manchester, Kentucky. Then it flickered and showed me in Virginia. Then Tennessee. Then back to Kentucky, but in a completely different county. The map itself kept redrawing. Roads appearing and disappearing, town names changing. The talk radio had turned to static. I tried scanning for other stations, but every frequency was the same white noise, except occasionally I'd catch fragments of voices. Not normal radio voices. These were urgent, desperate. Can anyone hear me? I've been driving for hours. Why does this keep happening? Then back to static. I got back in the truck and kept driving. What else could I do? My phone had no signal, GPS was useless, and turning around seemed pointless when the road was apparently looping anyway. I kept my eyes on the odometer. From mile marker 38 to whenever I'd see it again, I'd know exactly how far I'd traveled. 12.3 miles. That's how long until I saw it again. Mile marker 38, dead tree, everything identical. But according to my trip odometer, I'd driven 12.3 miles of road. The problem was, there shouldn't have been another mile marker 38 for another 62 miles, and definitely not with the exact same dead tree. That's when I saw the other truck. It was ahead of me, maybe a quarter mile, taillights glowing red in the darkness. I hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour, and the sight was almost comforting. I sped up to catch it, planning to flag the driver down, compare notes, figure out what the hell was happening. As I got closer, I could make out details. Same model as my truck, same company logo on the trailer, same dent in the rear bumper that I'd gotten last month backing into a loading dock in Memphis. It was my truck. I was following myself. I hit the brakes hard, truck shuddering to a stop. The other truck kept going, taillights disappearing around a curve. My hands were shaking on the wheel. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. I looked in my side mirror and screamed. There was another truck behind me, headlights bright in my mirror, stopped about 50 feet back. The same truck. My truck. I don't know how long I sat there. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. Time felt wrong, like it was moving at different speeds all at once. Eventually, I started driving again. The truck behind me started too, matching my speed exactly. The truck ahead of me was gone, but I knew I'd catch up to it eventually. Or it would catch up to me. However this worked. Mile marker 38 appeared again. The dead tree. I kept driving. This time I tried counting, keeping my mind focused on something concrete. 1, 2, 3, 4. I counted every second. Got to 720 seconds, 12 minutes exactly before the marker appeared again. 12.3 miles, 12 minutes. The loop was consistent at least, except it wasn't, because the next time it took 15 minutes, then 8, then 20. The distance on my odometer kept changing too. Sometimes 12.3 miles, sometimes 7.8. Once it showed 94.6 miles between markers. But it was always the same marker, same tree, same spot. Other things started appearing on the road. A car would pass me going the opposite direction, headlights briefly illuminating my cab. Normal enough, except I'd see the same car 3 more times in the next loop. Always coming from ahead, always passing me at the exact same spot. A green sedan with a cracked windshield. The driver never looked over, just stared straight ahead, hands at 10 and 2. Then there were the things that weren't cars. Shapes moving in the trees alongside the road keeping pace with my truck. Too tall to be deer, moving wrong to be human. Sometimes I'd catch them in my peripheral vision, and they'd freeze, like they knew I'd seen them. The moment I looked directly, they'd be gone. I tried, stopping again, thought, maybe if I just waited it out, morning would come, and this would end. I pulled over at mile marker 38, turned off the engine, and waited. The truck that had been behind me drove past. I watched it go, watched my own face behind the wheel, eyes forward, not even glancing at the truck parked on the shoulder. I looked exhausted, defeated. Like I'd been driving for days. Something knocked on my driver's side door. 3 sharp raps, knuckles on metal. I looked. Nobody there, just trees and darkness. 3 more knocks, harder this time. The door was locked, but the handle started to turn anyway, moving on its own. I started the engine and got back on the road. The radio came back to life. Not static this time, but a voice. Clear, professional, like a GPS system. Recalculating route, make a U-turn when possible. But I was on a 2-lane highway with no median. I couldn't turn around. Recalculating route. You have reached your destination. I was nowhere near Lexington. I saw a sign ahead, first one I'd seen besides mile markers in what felt like hours. It was for a town called Thousand Sticks, population 42, next exit 3 miles. I'd never heard of it, but at that point I didn't care. I took the exit, anything to get off this cursed stretch of highway. The exit ramp curved down and to the right, leading to a smaller road. I followed it, expecting to see houses, maybe a gas station, something. The road just kept going, narrow and dark, trees pressing in on both sides. No town, no buildings, nothing. And then the road curved left and started climbing, and I realized with growing horror that it was merging back onto the highway. Mile marker 38. The dead tree. I'd been driving for 4 hours. Something changed after that. I started seeing people standing on the side of the road. They'd appear in my headlights suddenly, just standing there, watching the truck approach. I'd blow past them, catch a glimpse of their faces in my mirror. Some of them I recognized. That waitress from the truck stop in Manchester where I'd grabbed coffee before all this started. She was supposed to be 30 miles behind me. A state trooper who'd given me a speeding ticket near Boone last month. My ex-wife Mara, who lived in Oregon and I hadn't seen in 7 years. They were all just standing there, evenly spaced along the road, appearing and disappearing in the darkness between my headlights and taillights. None of them moved. None of them tried to flag me down. They just watched. The sky started getting lighter. Not sunrise, wrong direction for that. Just a general lessening of the darkness, like the world was turning the brightness up slowly. I could see further into the trees now. There were more figures there, standing between the trunks, dozens of them. Hundreds, all facing the road, all perfectly still. My fuel gauge had been at a quarter tank when this started. It was still at a quarter tank. I'd been driving for hours, but the needle hadn't moved. The odometer kept spinning, though, racking up miles. 234, 467, 1,881. Numbers that didn't make sense for the distance I'd covered. I saw the other trucks then, not just one behind and one ahead, but many. An entire convoy of my trucks stretching back into the distance, all following the same road, all trapped in the same loop. I wondered how many versions of me there were. How many Quincy's were driving this endless circle, each one thinking he was the real one. The dead tree started changing. Each time I passed it, it looked different. First it was split by lightning, then it was whole, then it was just a stump, then it was enormous and ancient, then it was a sapling, then it was gone entirely, and there was just empty space where it had been. The mile markers stayed the same. Always 38. I don't remember deciding to try something different. But I found myself turning the wheel hard to the right, driving off the road, bouncing over the shoulder and into the trees. The truck crashed through underbrush, branches scraping against metal, headlights illuminating trunks and darkness. I kept my foot on the gas, kept pushing forward, away from the road, away from mile marker 38. The trees got denser, closer together. My trucks shouldn't have been able to fit between them, but somehow I kept going, the forest opening up just enough to let me pass. The figures I'd seen before were everywhere now, pressing in close, faces blank and identical, all watching me try to escape. Then suddenly, impossibly, I was back on the highway. Headlights illuminating pavement, white lines stretching ahead, mile marker 38. The dead tree split in a perfect Y. But something was different. The truck behind me was gone. The figures were gone. The sky was starting to lighten with real sunrise, pink and orange on the horizon. My GPS beeped. Route recalculated. Continue on Highway 421 for 47 miles. The map looked normal. Town names I recognized. The location dot sitting exactly where it should be, not jumping around. I checked my odometer. I'd driven 621 miles since leaving Knoxville. The trip should have been 175. I drove straight to Lexington, delivered my load, and called my dispatcher. Told him I needed a few days off, family emergency. He asked why my GPS tracker showed me driving in circles for 4 hours, in the middle of the night. Said the company thought the equipment was malfunctioning because I'd apparently covered 600 miles without leaving a 10-mile stretch of road. I don't drive that route anymore. I don't care how much time it saves. When I have to go through Kentucky, I take I-75, stick to the main highways, drive during the day, and I always check my mile markers. If I ever see the same one twice, I'm abandoning the truck and walking. Sometimes, late at night when I'm driving empty stretches of highway, I see them in my mirrors. Other trucks, the same model as mine, the same company logo, following at a distance, matching my speed exactly. I know better than to slow down and let them catch up. I know better than to speed up and see if I'm chasing myself again. I just keep driving, eyes forward, radio off, counting mile markers, and praying each one is different from the last. If you're ever driving through the Appalachian Mountains at night and you pass the same landmark twice, don't try to figure out why. Don't stop to investigate. Don't try to find a way out. Just keep driving and pray that whatever loop you're in lets you out eventually. Some of us make it back, but I don't think all of us do. I think some of those trucks are still out there, still circling, drivers who never found the exit. And sometimes, I wonder if I really found mine, or if I'm still driving in circles and just don't know it yet. The Haunted Fears horror family knows that roads have their own rules, and breaking them comes with a price. Stay with us because our next story takes us somewhere even stranger, to a town that time forgot, or maybe a town that never really existed at all. Would you stay or run if you found a ghost town that looked abandoned for 70 years, but had fresh coffee still warm on the kitchen table? 3 of us went to Thurmond looking for history, but we found something that shouldn't exist. My name's Jefferson, and I'm what you'd call an urban explorer. I document abandoned places, take photographs, post them online. It's not just about the thrill for me, it's about preserving history that's being forgotten. My friends Bellamy and Rosalia feel the same way. We've explored dozens of abandoned sites across West Virginia, from old coal mines to forgotten churches. But Thurmond was different. Thurmond changed everything. Thurmond's a real place, I want to make that clear. It sits in the New River Gorge, and back in the early 1900s, it was a booming railroad town. At its peak, more freight passed through Thurmond than Cincinnati and Richmond combined. But when the coal industry collapsed and the railroad moved on, the town died with it. By the 1950s, it was practically abandoned. Now, it's part of the National Park System, preserved but empty. Population dropped from thousands to about 5 people who refused to leave. We arrived on a Saturday in October 2018, around 4 p.m. The plan was simple: document the remaining structures before dark, camp nearby, and leave Sunday morning. The town looked exactly as we expected from our research. Old brick buildings lining the railroad tracks. The Thurmond Depot still standing. Houses with broken windows and collapsed porches. Everything covered in vines and decay, slowly being reclaimed by the forest. Bellamy was our photographer, had this expensive digital camera that could capture details in low light. Rosalia handled video and notes, documenting everything we saw. I did both. Plus, I was the one who researched the history, knew which buildings were safe to enter and which weren't. We'd done this dozens of times before. We knew what we were doing. The first house we entered was on the west end of town, 2-story structure that used to belong to a railroad supervisor, according to my notes. The front door was unlocked, hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Inside, it was what you'd expect: water damage, collapsed ceiling in parts, furniture left behind and rotting. We took our photos, recorded our observations, moved on. The second house was different. We noticed it immediately. The door wasn't just unlocked, it was open, like someone had just walked through. The porch wasn't collapsed like the others. The boards were solid under our feet. Bellamy pushed the door wider, and we stepped inside. The house was furnished. Not just furniture left behind, but arranged, neat, like someone lived there. A floral couch with pillows positioned carefully. A coffee table with magazines fanned out. Curtains on the windows that weren't torn or faded, but clean, pressed. The air didn't smell like mildew and rot. It smelled like coffee. "This can't be right," Rosalia whispered, her camera already recording. "The Historical Society said this town's been empty since the 70s. I walked into the kitchen. There was a pot on the stove, an old electric model from the 1950s by the look of it. I touched the pot. Warm. Not hot, but definitely warm, like someone had made coffee maybe 30 minutes ago. Next to it, a cup, half full, steam still rising from the surface. Bellamy picked up one of the magazines from the coffee table. "Jefferson, look at this." He held it out. Life magazine, dated September 1951. But it wasn't yellowed or brittle. It looked fresh off the newsstand, colors bright, pages crisp. We should have left then. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong. But we're explorers, and this was the most unusual thing we'd ever encountered. We had to document it, had to understand it. So we kept going. The living room had a calendar on the wall, one of those old tearaway types, each day a separate page. It was showing October 20th, 1951, yesterday's date by 1951 standards. But what made my blood run cold was that someone had torn off today's page. It was lying on the floor beneath the calendar, crumpled slightly, like someone had done it this morning. Rosalia found the photographs, framed pictures on the mantel showing a family, mother, father, 2 children. They were wearing 1950s clothing, posed in that stiff formal way people did back then. But the photos weren't faded. The colors were vivid, the people's faces clear and distinct. The father was wearing railroad workers' clothes. "We need to check the other houses," I said, my voice not quite steady. "See if they're all like this." They were. Every single house we entered after that was the same. Furnished, arranged, lived in. Food in kitchens that was still fresh, bread that wasn't molded, milk in old-fashioned glass bottles that hadn't gone sour, beds made with hospital corners, clothes hanging in closets that smelled of detergent, not decay. Everything dated to the early 1950s, but everything was recent, current, impossible. The train depot was worse. The ticket counter still had the schedule board up, white letters slotted into black felt, listing departures and arrivals. The dates were all from October 1951, but someone had updated them. The times were current, adjusted for trains that should have been arriving that very evening. October 19th, 2018 converted to 1951 format. "This is insane," Bellamy kept saying, snapping photos frantically. "This is completely insane. Someone's maintaining this place, making it look occupied, but why? And who?" That's when we heard the train whistle. Long, loud, echoing through the gorge. All 3 of us froze. There was no active rail line through Thurmond anymore. The tracks were still there, but no trains ran on them. The whistle came again, closer now, and we could hear it, the distant rumble of something massive approaching on rails. "Outside now." I grabbed Rosalia's arm, pulled her toward the door. We ran out onto the platform, and that's when we saw it. Headlight cutting through the growing dusk. A locomotive approaching from the north. A real physical train, steam billowing, wheels grinding on tracks. It was pulling passenger cars, old-style ones from the 1940s and 50s. The train slowed, stopped at the platform. Through the windows, we could see passengers. People in period clothing, men in suits and hats, women in dresses, children pressed against the glass. They were looking at us, pointing, their faces pale and indistinct in the dimming light. The passenger car door opened. A conductor stepped out wearing an official railroad uniform, complete with the cap and brass buttons. He looked at us, consulted a pocket watch, then spoke. "You folks are early. Train doesn't depart for another hour. Might want to get your luggage from the depot." His voice was wrong. It had an echo to it, like it was coming from far away and being projected somehow. His face was clear enough, but when I tried to focus on his features, they seemed to shift, like I was looking at him through water. "We're not passengers," I managed to say. "We're just visiting. We're leaving, actually." The conductor's expression didn't change. Everyone's a passenger eventually. Train's got to keep running. Schedule's got to be maintained. He gestured back at the train. "Plenty of room. Most of these folks have been riding for years. They don't mind company." Bellamy grabbed my shoulder. "We need to go. Right now." His voice was shaking. He was looking past the conductor, at the train windows. The passengers were all pressed against the glass now, watching us with hungry expressions, mouths moving but no sound coming out. We ran, didn't look back, didn't stop to gather our equipment. We just ran, out of the depot, down the tracks, toward where we'd parked our car about a quarter-mile from town. Behind us, I could hear the train whistle again, and voices, dozens of them, calling out, "Don't leave yet. The train's about to depart. You should stay." Everyone stays, eventually. The town was changing as we ran through it. The buildings weren't abandoned anymore. Lights were on in the windows. I could see figures moving inside, shadows of people going about their evening routines. Smoke was coming from chimneys. The whole town was alive, populated, functioning, exactly as it had been in 1951. Our car was where we'd left it, thank God. Bellamy's hands were shaking so bad he couldn't get the key in the ignition. Rosalia had to do it. We peeled out, tires kicking up gravel, headlights illuminating the road ahead. In the rearview mirror, I could see Thurmond behind us, glowing with lights, fully inhabited, alive in a way that was completely wrong. We didn't stop until we hit the main highway, 20 miles away. Pulled over at a gas station, all of us breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. Bellamy checked his camera. He'd taken over 200 photos in Thurmond. Every single one was corrupted, showing only static or strange streaks of light. Rosalia's video camera was worse. When she played back the footage, we could see the houses, see the furnished interiors, but there were people in them, people we hadn't seen when we were there. Figures in 1950s clothing, moving through rooms, sitting in chairs, cooking in kitchens. They ignored us completely in the footage, like we weren't there, or like we were the ghosts, not them. One clip showed us standing on the train depot platform. The timestamp said 5:47 p.m., right when the train arrived. But in the video, the train had been there the whole time, and we were the ones appearing suddenly, materializing out of nowhere onto the platform while the conductor and passengers stared at us in shock. We reported it. Of course we did. Called the Park Service, tried to explain what we'd found. They were polite but dismissive. Said Thurmond was regularly monitored, that there was no train service, no occupied buildings, no fresh coffee on stoves. They suggested we'd experienced some kind of shared hallucination, maybe carbon monoxide from entering sealed structures. But 3 days later, I got a call from a ranger I'd spoken to. His voice was quiet, cautious. "We sent someone to check the houses you mentioned," he said. "Found something odd. One of them, the two-story on the west end, had a coffee pot on the stove. Pot was still warm. And there was a calendar on the wall showing October 1951. Someone had torn off yesterday's page." He didn't say anything for a moment, and I didn't either. Finally, he spoke again. "We're sealing those buildings, and we're putting up better barriers. Thurmond's off-limits to visitors for the foreseeable future. Don't go back there. Don't talk about this publicly. Some places got stuck somehow, caught between then and now, and disturbing them makes it worse." I haven't been back. Neither have Bellamy or Rosalia. But sometimes, late at night, I look up train schedules online, and I swear I see listings for Thurmond. Departures and arrivals that shouldn't exist, destinations that aren't on any map. And I wonder how many other towns are out there, preserved not by the Park Service, but by something else. Something that keeps them running on schedules from decades ago, waiting for passengers who never quite arrive. The Haunted Fears horror family knows that some places exist outside of time, trapped in moments that refuse to end. Stay with us, because the next story takes us from a town frozen in the past to a home where the past refuses to stay buried. If you inherited a house with a basement door locked from the outside and found journals saying, "Never let it out," would you open it? I did, and now I understand why some family secrets should stay buried forever. My name's Sierra, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew everything about my family. My grandfather, Bruno Hayes, raised me after my parents died when I was 8. He lived in this old homestead outside Elkhorn City, Kentucky, deep in the mountains, where the nearest neighbor was 2 miles away. It was isolated, quiet, and filled with memories. When he passed away last September at 92, he left the house to me in his will. I hadn't been back to that house in 5 years. College, then work in Lexington. Life just got busy. But standing there after the funeral, looking at the place where I'd spent my childhood, I felt guilty for staying away so long. The house needed work, sure, but it was solid, built by my great-grandfather in 1947. I decided to spend a few weeks cleaning it out, sorting through Bruno's belongings, deciding what to keep and what to donate. The house was exactly as I remembered. 2 stories, wood frame construction, wraparound porch that creaked when you walked on it. Inside, everything was frozen in time. Bruno's reading glasses still on the kitchen table, his coffee mug in the sink, the old television in the living room still tuned to the Weather Channel. It was like he'd just stepped out and would be back any minute. I started upstairs, working through the bedrooms. My old room was untouched, still had posters on the walls from when I was 16. Bruno's room was harder, going through his clothes and personal items, but I managed. It took me 3 days to work through the second floor. Then I moved to the main level, the kitchen, living room, his study. That's where I found the first journal. It was in his desk drawer, leather-bound, pages yellowed with age. The first entry was dated January 3rd, 1953. Bruno would have been 24 years old, newly married to my grandmother Jacqueline. The handwriting was neat, careful, nothing like the shaky scrawl he'd had in his later years. I started reading. The early entries were mundane, talking about daily life, farm work, the weather. But around March, the tone changed. He wrote about sounds coming from the basement at night, scratching, tapping, something moving around down there. He thought it was rats at first, set traps, found nothing. The sounds got worse, louder, more deliberate. By June, he was writing about how Jacqueline refused to go near the basement door, how she'd wake up crying, saying something was calling her name from down there, how their dog Amos wouldn't enter the kitchen anymore, would just stand in the doorway whining and backing away. The entries got stranger. Bruno started describing conversations he was having through the basement door. Something down there that could talk, that knew things about him, about his family, about events that hadn't happened yet. It told him about my grandmother's death. She wouldn't die until 1989, but it described the exact circumstances in 1953. A car accident on Route 80, a rainy Tuesday in November. Everything accurate, down to the color of the car that hit her. I flipped ahead, scanning entries, years of documentation, the thing in the basement talking to him, making predictions, offering deals. Bruno always refused, but he kept listening, kept writing it all down. The last entry in that journal was from 1967. I've stopped trying to understand what it is. I just know it can't get out. The locks hold. They have to hold. There were more journals. I found them in the study, 14 of them total, spanning from 1953 to just 3 weeks before his death. Decades of documentation about whatever was in that basement. The later journals were less detailed, just brief notes. Fed it today. Still quiet. Changed the locks, added 2 more. It asked about Sierra, told it nothing. My blood went cold at that. It had asked about me, by name. I kept reading, hands shaking now. The final entry, dated September 2nd, just 12 days before Bruno died, said simply, "Getting weak. Can't maintain the locks much longer. Sierra must never open the door. Must never listen to it. Burn the house down if necessary, but don't let it out." I sat there in his study for a long time, journals spread around me, trying to process this. My rational mind said it was dementia, that Bruno had gotten confused in his old age, created this elaborate delusion. But the journals spanned 70 years. The handwriting changed, aged, but the story stayed consistent. Something in the basement. Something that couldn't be allowed out. I'd been in the house for 3 days and hadn't gone to the basement yet. Hadn't even thought about it. The door was in the kitchen, looked like every other door in the house except for the locks. 7 of them, all different types. Deadbolts, padlocks, slide bolts, chain lock. All on the outside, all locked tight. I walked to the door, put my hand on it. The wood was old, solid oak, cool to the touch. I pressed my ear against it, listening. Nothing. Just silence. I almost convinced myself it was nothing, just an old man's paranoia when I heard it. A soft sound like someone shifting position. Movement from down below. Hello? My voice sounded too loud in the quiet kitchen. No response. I waited. Nothing. I was about to pull away when I heard it again, closer now. Something moving upstairs, slow and deliberate. Then a voice, muffled by the door, but clear enough. Sierra, you came back. I jerked away from the door like it had burned me. The voice was wrong, distorted, like multiple people speaking at once, but slightly out of sync. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Who's there? You know who I am. Your grandfather told you. He wrote it all down, didn't he? Always so careful with his documentation. The voice had a quality to it that made my skin crawl, like it was coming from both inside and outside my head simultaneously. You're not real. This is insane. You're not real. I was backing away from the door, but I couldn't stop listening. I'm as real as you are, Sierra Hayes. More real, maybe. I've been here longer. Much longer. This house was built on top of me, but I was here first. Your great-grandfather knew, made a deal, fed me, kept me contained, and in return, I gave him knowledge. Protected the family. Mostly. My grandfather said to never let you out. Laughter, if you could call it that. Multiple voices laughing in a round, creating a dissonant harmony that made my teeth ache. Bruno was afraid. He had a reason to be. But he also knew I was useful. Why do you think this family prospered? Why do you think you survived when your parents died? That car accident that killed them, but left you without a scratch. That was me, Bruno asked, and I delivered. I wanted to run, to get out of the house and never come back, but something kept me there, kept me listening. What do you want? The same thing I've always wanted, to be acknowledged, to be fed, to continue our arrangement. Bruno's gone now, but you're here, your family. The deal passes down. The voice was closer now, right on the other side of the door. I could see the wood flexing slightly, like something was pressing against it from the inside. I'm not making any deals with you. You already did. You came back. You're here. That's enough. Something scratched against the door, a sound like fingernails on wood, except longer, sharper. Open the door, Sierra. Just one lock. That's all. Let me see you. My hand was moving toward the locks before I realized what I was doing. I caught myself, pulled back. No, I'm not doing this. The scratching stopped. Silence for a long moment. Then, you will. Eventually. They always do. Bruno held out for 70 years, but even he opened the door sometimes. Had to feed me, to give me what I needed. You'll be the same. This house is yours now. I'm yours now, whether you want me or not. I ran. Out of the kitchen, through the living room, out the front door. Stood on the porch in the cold October air, breathing hard, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. But I hadn't. The voice was real. Whatever was down there was real. I called my Uncle Zaid, Bruno's younger brother who lived in Ashland, told him everything. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Your grandfather never told you? Told me what? About the basement, about what's down there. He made me promise never to talk about it, but, Sierra, There's a reason that house stayed in the family. A reason we never sold it. Whatever's in that basement, it's been there since before the house was built. Great-Grandpa Wayne found it when he was clearing the land. Some kind of cave system goes deep into the mountain. He found something down there, something old. What did he find? I don't know, he never said. But he built the house over it, sealed it in the basement, made a deal with it. It's protected our family for 3 generations, Sierra. But the protection comes with rules. Never let it out. Never ignore it completely. And never, ever tell outsiders. That's insane, Uncle Zaid. You're talking about this like it's normal. It's not normal, but it's real. You felt it, didn't you? You heard it. That's more than your grandfather told most people. It must want something from you. I went back inside. Had to. It was getting dark, and all my things were still there. The house was quiet. I avoided the kitchen, made myself a meal in the living room using a microwave I brought from Lexington. Tried to act normal. Tried to ignore the fact that something was in the basement, something that knew my name. Around midnight, I heard it again. Not from the basement this time, from inside the walls, scratching, moving like something was crawling through the spaces between the rooms. I sat up in bed, flashlight in hand, tracking the sound as it moved through the house. It circled my room, slowly, deliberately, then stopped right behind the headboard. You can't sleep, can you? The voice, muffled by plaster and wood, but unmistakable. You're afraid. You should be. But you're also curious. That's why you haven't left. That's why you're still here. Stay away from me. I can't stay away. This is my house. You're just living in it. Bruno understood that. Eventually. He fought it for years, but he came around. Started talking to me, started listening, started accepting what I could offer. The scratching resumed, moving along the wall. He was sick, you know, cancer. Doctor said he had 6 months. He lived 5 more years. Want to know why? I didn't answer. He asked me, made a deal. 5 years for 5 offerings. He gave me what I wanted, and I gave him time. Time to get his affairs in order. Time to try to warn you, though he knew you wouldn't listen. Nobody ever listens until they have to. What do you want from me? Nothing you can't spare. Just acknowledgement, respect, the occasional conversation. I get lonely down here, Sierra. 70 years with only Bruno to talk to, and he was terrified of me the whole time. But you're different. You're curious. You want to understand. I can feel it. The scratching stopped. The house fell silent. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat there, waiting for sunrise, planning my escape. But when morning came, I didn't leave. I couldn't. Because it was right. I was curious. I needed to understand what this thing was, what my family had been hiding for 3 generations. I spent the day researching, found property records showing that Wayne Hayes bought the land in 1946 from the estate of a man named Vincenzo Morris, who'd gone missing in 1945. Before that, the land had been empty for decades. Local historical society had stories about cave systems in the area, about strange disappearances, about sounds from underground that the old-timers said were mountain demons. That night, I went to the basement door, all 7 locks still secure. I didn't open them, just stood there, hand on the wood, feeling it vibrate slightly under my palm. Are you what they called mountain demons? They called me many things. Demon, spirit, old one. I'm none of those. I'm something that was here before names, before language. Your kind found me, tried to kill me, failed, then learned to accommodate me. That's all this is. Accommodation. My grandfather's journals say you can tell the future. I can see patterns, threads, possible outcomes. The future isn't fixed, Sierra. It's flexible. But some threads are stronger than others. I can see the strong ones. Tell you which path leads where. Tell me something then. Prove it. Silence for a moment. Then, 3 days from now, you'll receive a call from your job. They're eliminating your position. You'll be unemployed by the end of the week, unless you want a different outcome. I can arrange that too. I backed away from the door. This was insane. I was talking to something through a locked door, something that claimed it could change the future. But 3 days later, the call came. My supervisor, apologetic, explaining that the company was restructuring. My position was being eliminated. Exactly as it had predicted. I went back to the basement door that night. You knew. I told you. I see the threads. That was an easy one. Want me to change it? Want me to make them call back, say it was a mistake, reinstate you? I can do that. For a price. What price? Open one lock. Just one. Let me see you through the crack, that's all. I stood there, staring at the locks, weighing my options. Unemployed, bills to pay, this house to maintain, or make a deal with something I didn't understand, something my grandfather had warned me against. In the end, I walked away. Didn't open the lock, didn't make the deal. I left Kentucky 2 weeks later, put the house up for sale, took everything I wanted, and drove back to Lexington. The house still hasn't sold. Real estate agent says potential buyers love it until they see the basement door. Then they always change their minds. Something about it bothers them, she says, makes them uncomfortable. Sometimes, late at night, I get calls from my old number, the landline in that house. I never answer, but I let it ring, and I can hear it on the voicemail, scratching, tapping, and a voice, distant but clear. You'll be back, Sierra. They always come back. This is your inheritance. You can't escape it. Maybe it's right. Maybe I will go back, because sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd opened that lock, what I would have seen through the crack, what deals I could have made. And that curiosity, that terrible curiosity, is exactly what it's counting on. The Haunted Fears horror family knows that some inheritances come with chains you can't see, and prices you don't know you're paying until it's too late. Stay with us, because our next story takes us from what's hidden in the basement to what's burning in the forest, and the circle nothing can cross. Could you sleep knowing you discovered a place where fire refuses to burn and something inside is calling your name? I couldn't. And what happened next made me question everything I thought I understood about the natural world. My name's Madden, and I've been fighting wildfires for the Forest Service for 12 years. I've seen fires do strange things, seen them jump highways, climb cliffs, change direction against the wind. Fires unpredictable, dangerous, and utterly fascinating. But what I saw in the Cumberland Gap Forest in August 2017 broke every rule I thought I knew about how fire behaves. We got the call on August 14th. Lightning strike had started a forest fire near the Kentucky-Virginia border, spreading fast through dry timber. Our crew of 8 was dispatched from the station in Middlesboro, expected to contain it before it reached any residential areas. Standard wildfire response, nothing we hadn't done 100 times before. The fire chief was a woman named Amaya, 20-year veteran who'd fought fires from California to Maine. She briefed us in the truck on the way out. 500 acres burning, wind pushing it northeast. Terrain was rough but manageable. We'd establish a fire break, do some controlled burns to starve it of fuel, should have it contained by nightfall. We were wrong about that last part. The fire was bigger than initial reports suggested. By the time we got there, it had spread to nearly 800 acres, flames reaching 30 feet high in some areas. The heat was intense even from a distance, smoke turning the afternoon sky orange and black. We got to work immediately, clearing brush, setting up our equipment, preparing to fight. I was on the eastern flank with 2 other crew members, Lachlan and Kaymoor. We were moving through thick forest, checking the fire's spread, when Lachlan stopped suddenly. "Hey, you guys seeing this?" Ahead of us, maybe 200 yards away, the fire just stopped. Not gradually, not because it ran out of fuel, but like it hit an invisible wall. Flames were roaring up to the edge of a perfectly circular area, and then nothing. Inside the circle, the forest was untouched. Green trees, undergrowth still alive, like the fire couldn't reach it. We radioed it in to Amaya. Her response crackled through the static. Probably a natural fire break. Underground water source, keeping the ground moist. Mark it on your map and keep moving. But it didn't look like a natural fire break. The circle was too perfect, too defined. The fire was burning everything around it in a chaotic pattern, but this area was preserved like someone had drawn a line and said, "Not here." Shyam, who was our crew's scientist type, always analyzing everything, pulled out his thermal camera. He scanned the circle. That's weird. The temperature inside is actually lower than ambient. It's cooler in there than it should be. Like, significantly cooler. How's that possible with fire all around? I asked. It's not. Physics doesn't work that way. Heat should be radiating inward, raising the temperature, but it's reading 10 degrees colder inside that circle than outside it. We moved closer, carefully, watching the flames dance at the edge of this impossible boundary. The circle was maybe 300 feet across, filled with old-growth trees that had to be at least 200 years old. In the center, we could see something standing, but the smoke made it hard to make out details. "Chief, this is Madden. You need to see this. It's not a natural fire break. Something's wrong here." Amaya arrived 20 minutes later with the rest of the crew. By then, the fire had surrounded the circle completely. Flames on all sides, but the interior remained untouched. She pulled out binoculars, scanned the area, then lowered them slowly with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Fear. "What are those?" she said quietly. I took the binoculars. Inside the circle, scattered among the trees, were bones. Dozens of animal skeletons arranged in patterns. Concentric circles, spirals, geometric shapes that had to be deliberate. Deer, bears, smaller animals I couldn't identify. All positioned carefully, intentionally. And the trees. The bark on every tree inside that circle was carved with symbols. Not random scratches, but deliberate markings. Repeated patterns that looked ancient. Some of the carvings were weathered, decades or centuries old. Others looked fresh, the wood still white where it had been cut. "We need to back off," Amaya said. "Report this to the Park Service. Let them handle it." But the fire wasn't giving us that option. It was spreading, surrounding us, and the wind was shifting. We had to either go through the circle or risk getting cut off and trapped. Amaya made the call. "We go through. Stay together, don't touch anything, and move fast." We entered the circle. The temperature drop was immediate and unsettling. It had been 95 degrees outside, with fire heat pushing it higher. Inside the circle, it felt like maybe 60 degrees. Our breath came out in faint clouds. The sound changed, too. Outside, fire was roaring, trees cracking, constant noise. Inside, it was silent. Not quiet, silent. Like the sound had been turned off completely. The bone patterns were more disturbing up close. They'd been there a long time, but they'd been maintained, added to. Recent kills mixed with ancient remains. The symbols carved in the trees were everywhere, covering every trunk we passed. Some I recognized from books on Appalachian folklore, old protection marks and boundary warnings. Others I'd never seen before. In the center of the circle was a stone structure. Not natural, built by human hands. A ring of standing stones, maybe 6 feet tall, arranged around a flat altar stone. On the altar was fresh blood. Still wet. Still warm. Animal blood, I hoped, but there was a lot of it. "Keep her moving," Amaya ordered, but her voice was shaking. "Don't look at it. Just keep moving." That's when we heard it. A voice, or multiple voices, I couldn't tell, coming from the trees, from the ground, from everywhere and nowhere, speaking words I didn't understand, in a language that sounded old, pre-English, maybe pre-language entirely, just sounds that formed patterns, that meant something even if I couldn't translate them. Lachlan stumbled, fell to his knees. "Do you hear that? It's saying my name. It knows my name." Chaim grabbed him, pulled him up. "Don't listen to it, keep walking." But I heard it too. My name, spoken in that ancient tongue. Except I understood it somehow. The voice was calling me, inviting me, promising things I didn't fully comprehend but desperately wanted. Knowledge, power, understanding of things humans weren't meant to know. We made it to the other side of the circle. As soon as we crossed the boundary, sound returned, heat returned, everything normal. We kept running, putting distance between us and that place, not stopping until we'd reached the safety of the cleared fire break. That night, once we'd established our camp, and the fire was more or less contained, Amaya called us together. What we saw in there, what we heard, we don't talk about it. Not to the media, not to the Park Service, not to anyone. Understood? Chief, there were fresh carvings in there, I said. Someone's been maintaining that place. Don't we have to report it? Report what? That we found some animal bones and old carvings? That we heard voices? They'll think we got smoke inhalation, got confused. No, we leave it alone. Places like that exist in these mountains. They're old, older than the settlements, older than the tribes that lived here before. You don't disturb them, and you don't talk about them. You've seen something like this before? Chaim asked. She was quiet for a long moment. Once. Different location, same idea. A place that fire wouldn't touch, that had rules different from the rest of the world. We tried to document it, take samples, analyze it scientifically. 3 of our crew died in accidents over the next month. Car crashes. 1 fell off a ladder at home. 1 had a heart attack. All people who'd been inside the circle. The rest of us who stayed quiet were fine. None of us slept that night. We took turns keeping watch, ostensibly for fire flare-ups, but really we were watching the circle. From our camp, we could see it in the distance. That perfect ring of green surrounded by blackened, burned forest. And we could see movement inside it. Figures tall and thin, moving between the trees. Sometimes standing perfectly still for hours. Sometimes arranging more bones, carving more symbols. Around 3 a.m. I was on watch when I saw Lachlan walking toward the circle. I called out to him, but he didn't respond, just kept walking in a straight line, like he was being pulled. I ran after him, caught, up, grabbed his shoulder. His eyes were open but unseeing, like he was sleepwalking. Lachlan, wake up. I shook him hard. He blinked, focused on me, then looked around in confusion. What am I doing out here? I was in my tent. I was sleeping. 2 hours later, it was Chaim's turn. Found him standing at the edge of our camp, facing the circle, swaying slightly. When we woke him, he said he'd been dreaming. The voice from the circle, telling him to come back, telling him there was something waiting for him there, something important. By morning, all of us who'd entered the circle had experienced it. Dreams, sleepwalking, an overwhelming urge to return. Even Amaya admitted she'd woken up with her boots on, halfway to the perimeter, before she realized what she was doing. We finished our containment work by noon the next day. The fire was out, or at least controlled enough that local crews could handle the mop-up. We packed our gear and got ready to leave. But before we did, Amaya made us try something. She wanted to attempt a controlled burn of the circle itself. See if we could force the fire across that boundary. We set it up carefully. Poured accelerant around the perimeter, made sure we had clear escape routes, lit it from multiple points simultaneously. The flames caught, burned hot, reached the edge of the circle, and stopped. Just like before. We added more fuel, tried different accelerants, used diesel, gasoline. Nothing worked. The fire would not cross that line. Then we tried something else. Chaim had the idea to shoot a flaming arrow into the circle, bypass the boundary by going over it. He was an archer as a hobby, had the equipment in his personal gear. We soaked the arrow in diesel, lit it. He drew back and fired. The arrow arced through the air, flames trailing behind it, crossed the boundary of the circle, and went out. Just extinguished mid-flight like someone had snuffed it. It landed inside the circle, just a regular arrow, no fire. Okay, Amaya said quietly. We're done here. Pack up, we're leaving. But the circle wasn't done with us. Over the next week, all 8 of us experienced the same thing. waking up in our homes, miles away from that forest, covered in dirt and scratches, with no memory of how we got that way. Finding symbols carved into our bedroom walls, the same symbols from the trees in the circle. Hearing that voice in our dreams, calling us back, promising us knowledge, power, belonging. 3 months after the fire, Lachlan disappeared. His car was found parked at a trailhead near Cumberland Gap. Search parties found his campsite about 5 miles in, right at the edge of where that circle had been. All his gear was there, arranged in a spiral pattern. He was never found. The Park Service sealed off that area. Official reason was erosion danger, unstable ground after the fire. But I've talked to other firefighters, other rangers. They all know places like this exist in the Appalachians. Circles, clearings, caves where the rules are different. Where something old lives, something that predates human understanding of the world. And once you enter those places, once you hear your name spoken in that ancient voice, you're marked, connected. Part of something you can never fully leave. I don't fight fires anymore. Took an early retirement, moved to Arizona, where the landscape is open and there are no old-growth forests hiding secrets. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That voice, calling my name in a language I shouldn't understand but do. And I know that someday, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 20 years, I'll wake up and find myself driving east, heading back to Kentucky, back to that circle in the forest, where fire wouldn't burn and something old is waiting patiently for me to return. The HauntedFears horror family knows that some boundaries exist for a reason, and crossing them changes you in ways you can't see until it's too late. Stay with us, because the next story takes us even deeper, beneath the surface, where the earth itself breathes. How would you react if you dove into a flooded ghost town and saw someone waving at you from inside a submerged house? I reacted by swimming closer, and that decision haunts me every single day since. My name's Trace, and I'm a professional scuba diver specializing in underwater exploration and documentation. I've dove shipwrecks in the Caribbean, explored cenotes in Mexico, mapped underwater caves in Florida. But nothing in 15 years of diving prepared me for what I found beneath Philpott Lake in Virginia, in the drowned remains of a town that was supposed to be empty. Philpott Lake was created in 1953 when the Army Corps of Engineers dammed the Smith River. The dam flooded several communities in the area, including the small town of Philpott, population maybe 300 at its peak. Most residents relocated before the flooding, took their belongings, moved to nearby towns. But the structures stayed submerged under hundreds of feet of water. Houses, a church, the general store, all still down there, preserved in the cold dark. I was hired by a historical society in September 2019 to document these submerged structures before they deteriorated beyond recognition. They wanted photos, video footage, detailed measurements, standard underwater archaeology work. I brought along my dive partner, a woman named Lyric, who'd been diving with me for 6 years. We'd worked dozens of sites together, trusted each other completely underwater. The first dive went fine. We descended to about 80 feet, found the remains of the old general store, took our photos and measurements. The structure was remarkably well preserved, walls still standing, roof mostly intact. Through the murky water and our dive lights, we could see shelves still inside, counters, even some debris that might have been old products. Everything covered in silt and algae, but recognizable. We surfaced, logged our findings, planned the next dive. The Historical Society was thrilled with the initial results. They wanted us to document the residential area next, particularly one house that had belonged to a prominent local family, the Carters. According to records, the Carters had refused to leave when the evacuation orders came, insisted they'd lived in Philpott for 3 generations, and weren't about to move for some government dam project. Eventually, the authorities forced them out. The family relocated to Martinsville under protest, and the house was left behind like all the others. That was in 1952. The family patriarch Houston Carter died in 1955, reportedly never recovering from losing his home. His wife Priscilla lasted another decade before passing. The children scattered, moved away, lost touch with the area entirely. The Carter house was deeper than the general store, closer to 95 feet. Lyric and I descended slowly, equalizing pressure, our lights cutting through the dark water. Visibility was maybe 15 feet, typical for reservoir diving. The house emerged from the gloom gradually, a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch, remarkably intact, considering it had been underwater for 66 years. As we approached, I noticed something odd. The windows weren't broken like they should have been. Most submerged structures lose their windows quickly, pressure and debris breaking the glass. But the Carter house had intact windows, and through them I could see curtains. Not torn or rotted curtains, but ones that looked almost new, moving slightly in the underwater current. I signaled to Lyric, pointed it out. She shrugged, gestured that we should continue the documentation. We swam closer, and that's when I saw the rocking chair on the porch. It was moving. Not from current, the water was relatively still at this depth, but rocking back and forth, slowly, deliberately, like someone had just stood up from it. My dive computer showed 97 feet. Water temperature 48 degrees, 19 minutes of bottom time remaining. Everything was normal by the numbers, but nothing about this felt normal. I looked at Lyric, saw my own unease reflected in her eyes behind her mask. We'd been diving long enough to trust our instincts, and both our instincts were screaming that something was wrong. But we had a job to do. We approached the front door, which was standing open. Water had warped the wood, but the door itself was intact, hanging on rusted hinges. I shined my light inside. The interior of the house was furnished. Not just furniture left behind, but arranged, maintained, like the family had just stepped out. A dining table set with plates and silverware, all covered in silt, but positioned carefully. Pictures on the walls in frames that should have rotted away decades ago. We entered slowly, cameras recording everything. The living room had a couch, chairs, a coffee table with what looked like magazines on it. Through a doorway, I could see a kitchen with pots on the stove, dishes in the sink. Everything was there. Everything preserved in a way that didn't make sense. That's when Lyric grabbed my arm, pointed up. Through the ceiling, through the floor of the second story, we could see light. Not our lights, not sunlight filtering down from the surface. Different light, warmer, like electric lights or oil lamps. Coming from upstairs, from inside this house that had been underwater for 66 years. I checked my gauges. 15 minutes bottom time left. We should have been ascending, but the professional in me wanted to document this impossible thing. We found the stairs, tested them carefully. The wood held, somehow, despite decades of water damage. We ascended inside the house, toward that light. The second-floor hallway had 3 doors. 2 were closed. 1 was open, and that's where the light was coming from. We swam toward it, and I could see now that the light wasn't electric, wasn't oil lamps. It was something else, something that glowed from within. The room itself, casting shadows that moved wrong. I reached the doorway first. Inside was a bedroom, fully furnished, bed made with blankets tucked in, a dresser with a mirror that somehow wasn't fogged with algae. And sitting in front of the mirror was a woman. She was wearing a dress from the 1950s, her hair styled in the fashion of that era. She was brushing her hair, long, slow strokes, watching herself in the mirror. She couldn't be real. Nobody can survive underwater without equipment, and we were at 97 feet. But there she was, moving naturally, breathing in water like it was air. I must have made some noise, some disturbance in the water, because she stopped brushing and turned to look at us. Her face was wrong, not grotesque, not decayed, just wrong, like looking at a photograph that had been exposed to water, colors running, features blurring. She smiled, and the expression didn't reach her eyes, which were empty, hollow, reflecting our lights like an animal's eyes would. She stood up, and I saw that she was translucent. I could see through her, see the wallpaper behind her, see her own bones inside her skin. She walked toward us, not swimming, walking on the floor like she was in air, and she raised one hand in a wave, not threatening, almost friendly. But terror shot through me anyway. Lyric pulled on my arm, signaling urgently to ascend. I didn't need convincing. We turned and kicked hard for the doorway, but the door swung shut. On its own, against the water pressure, it just closed, and when I reached it, it wouldn't open. The handle turned, but the door stayed shut, like something was holding it from the other side. The woman was behind us now. I could feel her presence without turning around. I could hear something too, which shouldn't have been possible underwater. A voice, muffled by the water and my equipment, but unmistakable. She was speaking. Words I couldn't quite make out, but the tone was clear. She wanted something. She wanted us to stay. My computer was beeping. 10 minutes of bottom time, then we'd need to start a safety stop before surfacing. We were running out of air, running out of time, and we were trapped in a room with something that shouldn't exist. I looked at Lyric, saw panic in her eyes, but also determination. She pointed at the window. The glass was intact, but glass breaks. Lyric pulled out her dive knife, the heavy metal handle designed for emergency situations. She slammed it against the window, once, twice, 3 times. The glass cracked, and water pressure did the rest, shattering it outward. We didn't hesitate, just dove through the opening, glass fragments scratching our wet suits, and kicked hard for open water. Behind us, through the broken window, I could see the woman standing in the room, watching us go. She wasn't alone anymore. There were others now, filling the room, filling the house, figures in 1950s clothing, men, women, children, all with that same translucent quality, all with those same empty eyes. And they were all waving at us, slow, deliberate waves, like they were saying goodbye to visitors. We ascended too fast. I know we did. My computer was screaming warnings. My ears were aching from inadequate equalization, but we didn't care. We just needed out of that water, away from that house, away from whatever was down there, still living in a town that drowned 66 years ago. We broke the surface, gasping, ripped out our regulators, and swam for the boat. Our support crew helped us aboard, asking if we were okay. What happened? Why did we surface so fast? Neither of us could answer right away. We just sat there, shaking, trying to process what we'd seen. When I finally checked my dive computer to log the dive data, it showed something impossible. According to the computer, we'd been at depth for 43 minutes, but we'd only had 30 minutes of air. Our tanks should have been empty, should have run out while we were still trapped in that room. Yet somehow, we'd made it to the surface, with air to spare. The footage from our cameras was worse. Lyric's camera had malfunctioned completely, showing only static. Mine worked, but what it captured didn't match what we'd seen. The house interior looked abandoned, rotted, like any 60-year-old submerged structure should look. No furniture arranged, no pictures on walls, no light from upstairs. Just empty rooms full of silt and debris, except for one frame. A single frame, maybe half a second of video, showed the bedroom. And in the mirror's reflection, you could see them. Dozens of figures, standing in the room, filling every available space, all facing the camera. All with their hands raised, waving. In the foreground, closest to the camera, was the woman. And she was smiling. We reported what we found, tried to explain what happened. The Historical Society was sympathetic, but skeptical. Nitrogen narcosis, they suggested, a shared hallucination caused by depth and pressure. It happens to divers, especially at depths near 100 feet. They wanted us to return, complete the documentation, but we refused. A week after our dive, my body started showing the bruises, handprint-shaped marks on my arms, my shoulders, my ankles. Like someone with very cold hands had grabbed me, held me. Lyric had them too. We compared marks, photographed them for documentation. They matched perfectly, like the same hands had touched both of us. The bruises faded after a few weeks, but something else remained. Both of us started having dreams about the house. Not nightmares exactly, just dreams where we're back underwater, swimming through those rooms, and the families there, going about their daily lives. The woman brushing her hair, a man reading a newspaper, children playing in another room. They acknowledge us now, in the dreams, wave hello when we enter, wave goodbye when we leave, like we're regular visitors. 3 months. After the dive, Lyric called me at 2 a.m. She was crying, which wasn't like her at all. "I drove to the lake tonight," she said. "I don't know why. I just woke up and started driving. I was going to get in the water, Trace. I was going to swim down there. No equipment, no tank. Just swim down. I got to the shore before I realized what I was doing. I'd been having the same urges. Dreams, where I was swimming down to the house, walking in through the front door, and the family welcomed me. Invited me to stay. Told me the water was fine once you got used to it. The breathing was just a matter of forgetting you needed air. In the dreams, it made perfect sense. We talked to other divers, ones who'd explored Philpott Lake before us. Found 3 who admitted to diving the residential area, seeing things they couldn't explain. One man, Salvador, had been diving there in 2007. He'd documented the same house we had, seen the same impossible preservation, same furniture arrangement. He'd seen figures moving in the windows as he approached. He never went back, moved out of state, gave up diving entirely. "They're still there," he told us over the phone. Everyone who lived in Philpott when it flooded, the ones who didn't want to leave, they stayed. The water rose, covered the town, and they just stayed, adapted, learned to live underwater, or they died, and something else is wearing their shapes. Either way, they're still in those houses, still living like it's 1952, and they want company. They want visitors to stay and join them. I don't dive anymore. Lyric doesn't either. We both sold our equipment, found different careers, tried to move on, but Philpott Lake is only 3 hours from where I live, and sometimes, late at night, I feel that pull. That urge to drive there, walk into the water, swim down to that house where a family's waiting, where a woman is still brushing her hair in a mirror, where time stopped in 1952 and never started again. The Historical Society hired other divers to complete the documentation. One of them never surfaced. They found his body 3 weeks later, inside the Carter house, sitting at the dining room table, still in his dive gear. The autopsy said he drowned, but his tank still had air in it. His regulator was in his mouth. Medical examiner couldn't explain how he drowned with functioning equipment and available air. The official report listed it as unexplained diving accident. But I know what happened. He went inside and the family invited him to stay. And he stayed. Because that's what they want. They're lonely down there, lonely and preserved, and living in a moment that refuses to end. And they're waiting for more visitors, more divers who'll swim down to document history and find instead a town that never really left, a community that refused to evacuate even when the waters rose to cover them. If you ever find yourself near Philpott Lake, if you're a diver and someone offers to pay you to document the submerged structures, think hard before accepting. Some jobs aren't worth the money. Some places should stay forgotten, should stay buried underwater, where the light doesn't reach, and the people who live there aren't quite people anymore. I learned that the hard way. I'm still learning it every night when I dream of swimming down, down, down to a house with lights in the windows and a woman waving hello from the porch. The Haunted Fears horror family knows that some towns never really die. They just sink below the surface and wait for someone to remember they're still there. Stay with us because our next story takes us from what waits underwater to what waits in the places we think are abandoned but never truly empty. What happens when you take shelter from a storm and hear your own name called over a hospital intercom in a building that's been abandoned for 60 years? I found out on a November night in the North Carolina mountains, and I've never been the same since. My name's Angie, and I'm a solo backpacker. I've hiked trails across the country, from the Pacific Crest to the Appalachian Trail, always alone, always self-sufficient. Some people think it's dangerous for a woman to hike solo, but I've been doing it for 8 years, without incident. I know how to read weather, how to handle wildlife, how to stay safe. At least, I thought I did until that night on the Blue Ridge Parkway. It was November 15th, 2018, and I was hiking a section of trail near Mount Mitchell in North Carolina. The forecast had called for light rain, nothing I couldn't handle, but mountain weather is unpredictable. By 4 p.m., the sky had turned black, and what started as drizzle became a downpour within minutes. Lightning was striking close, thunder shaking the ground, wind strong enough to knock me off balance. I needed shelter fast. My tent wouldn't hold up in this storm, and I was still 3 hours from the nearest trail shelter. That's when I saw the building through the trees, maybe a quarter mile off the trail. It was a small structure, looked abandoned but intact, roof still on, walls standing. I didn't hesitate. I left the trail and pushed through the underbrush toward it. As I got closer, I could make out details. It was a medical clinic, one of those rural facilities that used to serve remote mountain communities. Single-story, cinder block construction, probably built in the 1950s or 60s. The windows were intact but dark, the door hanging slightly open. A faded sign above the entrance read, Blue Ridge Medical Clinic, serving our community since 1962. I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside, dripping water on the linoleum floor. The interior was dim, lit only by what little daylight filtered through the grimy windows. I pulled out my flashlight and looked around. I was in a small waiting room with chairs lined against the walls, a reception desk with papers scattered across it, old magazines on a coffee table, everything covered in dust and mildew, but surprisingly intact for an abandoned building. The storm was getting worse outside, rain pounding on the roof, wind howling through cracks in the walls. I figured I'd wait it out here, maybe a few hours, then continue to the shelter once it passed. I found a relatively dry corner, put down my pack, and sat on one of the waiting room chairs. It creaked under my weight, but held. That's when I started really looking at the place. The papers on the reception desk weren't just scattered randomly. They were patient files, intake forms, all dated from the 1960s. I picked one up, careful not to disturb the dust too much. Patient, Jolene Carmichael, date, October 3rd, 1966. Complaint, persistent cough. The handwriting was neat, professional, and the form was in surprisingly good condition for being over 50 years old. I walked deeper into the clinic, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. A hallway led to examination rooms, 4 of them, doors standing open. Each room had the standard setup: examination table, cabinets for supplies, a small desk and chair. In one room, there were still medical instruments on the counter, all laid out neatly like someone was about to use them. Stethoscope, blood pressure cuff, otoscope, all old-fashioned but perfectly arranged. The third examination room was different. The table had restraints on it, leather straps with buckles, positioned for wrists and ankles. I stared at them, feeling unease creep up my spine. Maybe this was normal for the time period, some kind of procedure that required restraints. But the walls of this room had scratch marks on them, deep gouges in the plaster like someone had clawed at them desperately. I moved to the 4th room, and that's where I found the files. Boxes of them, stacked against the wall, all labeled with years. 1962, 1963, 1964, continuing through to 1969. I pulled one out from 1967 and opened it. The files inside weren't like the intake forms in the waiting room. These described treatments that made my stomach turn. Electroshock therapy, insulin shock therapy, procedures that sounded more like torture than medicine. Patients listed as uncooperative or resistant to treatment. Notes about restraints, sedation, isolation. One file was for a patient named Kira Thompson, age 16. admitted in August 1968 for hysteria and delusions. The treatment log described multiple sessions of electroshock therapy over a 6-week period. The final entry, dated September 20th, 1968, simply said, "Patient expired during treatment. Body released to family." I felt sick. This place hadn't just been a medical clinic. It had been something darker. Somewhere they sent people who were inconvenient, who needed to be treated into compliance. And from the looks of the files, not everyone survived the treatment. Thunder crashed outside, close enough to make the building shake. The lights flickered on. Not all of them, just the emergency lights. Those battery-powered units that are supposed to stay functional in power outages. Except this building had been without power for decades. There shouldn't have been any functional emergency lights, but there they were, glowing a sickly green, casting long shadows down the hallway. I heard a sound from deeper in the building, a door opening, hinges creaking. Then footsteps, slow and deliberate, walking on linoleum. I froze, listening. The footsteps were coming from what I assumed was the back of the clinic, an area I hadn't explored yet. They moved with purpose, not the random sounds of a building settling, but deliberate, human steps. "Hello?" My voice echoed in the empty hallway. The footsteps stopped. Silence for a long moment, broken only by the storm outside. Then, from somewhere in the building, I heard it. The intercom system crackled to life, static and hiss filling the air. A voice, female, professional, distant, spoke through the speakers. "Dr. Mack to examination room 3. Dr. Mack to examination room 3. The intercom clicked off. The footsteps resumed, coming closer now. I backed away, moving toward the waiting room, toward the exit. But another voice came through the intercom. Different this time, male, younger. "Nurse 7, please report to the isolation ward. Patient needs sedation." The isolation ward. There was another part of this clinic I hadn't found yet. The footsteps were in the hallway now. I could see a shadow moving in the dim emergency lighting. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like a white coat. A doctor's coat. But the figure wasn't quite right. Movements too smooth, too fluid, like it was gliding rather than walking. I ran. Out of the hallway, through the waiting room, heading for the front door. But it was closed now, and when I grabbed the handle, it wouldn't turn. Locked. I pulled harder, threw my weight against it, nothing. The door that had been standing open when I entered was now sealed tight. The intercom crackled again. This time the voice was calling a name I knew. My name. "Angie Harris to examination room 4. Angie Harris to examination room 4. Please report for your scheduled treatment." I spun around. The figure in the white coat was standing in the hallway entrance, watching me. I could see details now in the green emergency lighting. It was a man, or had been a man, wearing a doctor's coat that was yellowed with age. His face was wrong, features blurred like an old photograph, eyes dark and hollow. He was holding a clipboard, and he was reading from it. "Angie Harris, age 32, admitted November 15, 2018 for delusions and paranoia. Patient claims to be just hiking and caught in a storm, but exhibits clear signs of mental instability. Treatment recommended: electroshock therapy, series of 6 sessions, isolation between treatments." "I'm not a patient," I said, backing against the door. "I'm not supposed to be here. I just needed shelter from the storm." He looked up from the clipboard, those hollow eyes fixing on me. "That's what they all say. They all claim it's a mistake, that they shouldn't be here. But the intake forms don't lie, Miss Harris. You're scheduled for treatment." He gestured toward the hallway. "Please proceed to examination room 4. The doctor's waiting." I looked around desperately for another exit. Windows. I could break a window. I grabbed one of the waiting room chairs, heavy metal frame with cracked vinyl seat, and swung it at the nearest window. The chair bounced off like I'd hit a wall. The glass didn't even crack. I tried again, putting all my strength into it, same result. The windows were impossible to break. More figures were emerging from the hallway. Nurses in old-fashioned uniforms, white dresses with caps, all with that same blurred wrong quality to their faces. They moved in unison, walking toward me with empty eyes and welcoming smiles. One of them was carrying a tray of medical instruments. Another had a straitjacket folded over her arm. The intercom spoke again, a different voice this time, older, authoritative. Patient Harris is being uncooperative. Sedation recommended before treatment. Nurse Rhea, please prepare the injection. One of the nurses broke from the group, moving faster now, pulling a syringe from her pocket. The liquid inside glowed faintly green in the emergency lighting. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I couldn't let them inject me with it. I ran, not toward the locked front door, but deeper into the clinic, into the areas I hadn't explored yet. I found myself in a back hallway, doors on both sides. Through a window in one door, I could see what looked like an operating room, table in the center with lights above it, instruments laid out on trays. Through another, I saw what must have been the isolation ward, small rooms with heavy doors and observation windows, restraints attached to the walls. At the end of the hall was a door marked Staff Only. I tried it, and it opened. Inside was a break room, table and chairs, a small kitchenette, lockers along one wall. And on the far side, a window that wasn't reinforced like the others, just regular glass with a simple latch. I ran to it, fumbling with the latch. Behind me, I could hear them coming, footsteps and voices, the doctor calling my name, nurses discussing treatment protocols. The latch finally turned, and I pushed the window open. Rain and wind hit me immediately, but I didn't care. I threw my pack out first, then climbed through, scraping my arms on the frame, not caring, just needing to get out. I hit the ground running, grabbed my pack, and didn't look back. The storm was still raging, lightning flashing, thunder rolling, but I preferred the storm to whatever was inside that clinic. I ran through the woods in the darkness, using my flashlight to avoid trees. No idea which direction I was going, just away, always away. I found the trail eventually, more by luck than navigation. Followed it for 3 hours in the storm until I reached the shelter. There were 2 other hikers there, a couple from Virginia named Connor and Estrella, who looked at me in concern when I stumbled in, soaked and scratched, and probably wild-eyed with fear. They gave me dry clothes, hot coffee, a space by their fire. They asked what happened, but I couldn't explain. I just said I got lost in the storm. The next morning, after the storm passed, I went back with them. Wanted to prove to myself it was real, that I hadn't imagined it. We found the area where I'd left the trail, pushed through the underbrush to where the building should have been. There was nothing there, just forest, old-growth trees that had clearly been standing for decades, maybe centuries. No clearing, no building, no indication any structure had ever existed in that spot. But I had evidence. My pack was scratched and torn from climbing through the window. My arms had scrapes that matched the window frame. And when I checked my phone, which I'd kept in a waterproof case, I found photos. I didn't remember taking them, but there they were. Images of the clinic interior, the examination rooms, the files, the restraints. And in one photo, barely visible in the background, a figure in a white coat, watching the camera with hollow eyes. I researched when I got home. Found records of a Blue Ridge medical clinic that operated from 1962 to 1969 in that area of North Carolina. It was shut down after an investigation into patient deaths and unethical treatment practices. The director, a Dr. McHensley, and 3 nurses were charged with negligent homicide, but the case was dropped due to insufficient evidence. The building was supposedly demolished in 1971. Except I'd been inside it in 2018, or inside something that looked like it, that remembered it, that was still treating patients according to 1960s protocols. And according to whatever force runs that place, I'm still a patient. Because sometimes, late at night, I hear it. The intercom voice, faint but clear, calling my name. Angie Harris to examination room 4. Your treatment is waiting. Please report for your scheduled session. I don't hike solo anymore. Can't bring myself to do it. Every abandoned building I pass, every remote structure in the woods. I wonder if it's like that clinic, a place that refused to close, that kept operating long after the real world moved on, still looking for patients, still administering treatments that no one survives. The HauntedFears horror family knows that some places never really shut down. They just wait between moments, ready to trap anyone who seeks shelter in their walls. Stay with us, because our next story takes us from a clinic frozen in time to a place where the past isn't just preserved, it's actively repeating. Picture yourself trapped in a loop where you hear men dying in a mine collapse from 1924, and every time you try to leave, you end up back at the same place. That's what happened to me at Kaymoor, and I'm still not sure I ever really escaped. My name's Duke, and I'm a historian specializing in Appalachian coal mining history. I've spent 15 years researching the industry, documenting stories before they're lost to time. I've visited dozens of abandoned mining towns, interviewed hundreds of former miners and their families. It's not just academic for me, it's personal. My great-grandfather died in a mine collapse in 1931. I grew up hearing stories about the dangers miners faced, the companies that valued profit over lives, the communities that disappeared when the coal ran out. Kaymoor was one of the most productive mining operations in the New River Gorge area of West Virginia. From 1900 to 1962, it produced millions of tons of coal, but that production came at a cost. Multiple accidents, countless injuries, and one catastrophic collapse in 1924 that killed 40 men in a single day. The mine was never the same after that. Workers reported hearing things underground, voices calling for help, the sound of timbers cracking when nothing was breaking. By 1962, the company abandoned the site entirely. I'd been researching Kaymoor for 6 months, preparing to write a book about the disaster. I'd gone through newspaper archives, death certificates, company records, but I needed to see the place itself, walk the ruins, get a feel for where these men had worked and died. So in October 2017, I drove down from Morgantown and camped near the old mining complex. The hike down to Kaymoor is steep, 800 feet of elevation change in less than a mile. The trail takes you past what's left of the mining operation, rusted equipment, collapsed structures, the massive coal tipple still standing like a skeleton against the gorge. It's maintained by the Park Service now, a historic site, but they don't let you go into the actual mine entrances. Those were sealed decades ago for safety. I set up camp near the old superintendent's house around 4 p.m. The plan was simple: spend the night, document the area at different times of day, take photos and video for my book. The Park Service knew I was there. I'd gotten permission for overnight research. I had everything I needed: camping gear, recording equipment, a satellite phone in case of emergency. I'm thorough about safety. Always have been. Evening came quietly. The gorge gets dark fast once the sun drops below the ridgeline, shadows spreading like spilled ink. I made dinner on my camp stove, reviewed my notes about the 1924 disaster. It happened on March 8th at 6:47 a.m. Morning shift change. An explosion in the main shaft, possibly methane buildup, possibly faulty blasting from the day before. The blast collapsed 300 feet of tunnel. 40 men were inside. Only 12 bodies were ever recovered. The rest are still down there, entombed in rock and coal. I don't know what woke me. One moment I was asleep in my tent. The next I was sitting upright listening. It was dark, completely dark, the kind of darkness you only get in deep wilderness. I checked my phone, 6:42 a.m., almost sunrise, and then I heard it. A whistle, long and shrill, echoing through the gorge, the kind of whistle they use to signal shift changes in mining operations. I unzipped my tent and stepped out. The air was wrong, too cold for October, my breath coming out in thick clouds. And the sound. I could hear machinery, distant but distinct. The clank and grind of coal processing equipment, the rumble of loaded cars on rails. sounds that shouldn't exist in a mine that closed 55 years ago. Then I heard voices, men calling to each other, the casual conversation of workers heading to their shift. I grabbed my flashlight and recording equipment and moved toward the sounds. They were coming from the main mine entrance, the one that had been sealed with concrete and steel bars. Except when I got there, it was open. The seal was gone, and the entrance yawned like a mouth, lamplight flickering from inside. I should have left. Every instinct screamed to get back to camp, pack up, get out. But I'm a historian. I document. I record. And this was impossible, which meant I needed to understand it. I turned on my camera, checked that it was recording, and entered the mine. The tunnel was active. Lights strung along the ceiling, timber supports looking fresh and solid, rails with coal cars waiting to be filled. I could hear picks striking rock deeper in the mine, men working. The air smelled like coal dust and sweat and lamp oil. Everything was wrong because everything was right. Everything was exactly as it should have been in 1924. I walked deeper, camera recording everything. Past men in period mining clothes, faces blackened with coal dust, carrying equipment. They didn't acknowledge me, just kept working, talking among themselves in conversations I couldn't quite hear clearly. I tried to speak to one, but he walked right past me like I wasn't there. That's when I checked my watch, 6:47 a.m., and everything stopped. The men froze mid-motion. The sound ceased. Complete silence filled the mine, pressure building in the air like before a thunderstorm. Then, from deep in the tunnel, I heard it. A low rumble, growing louder, getting closer. The explosion. The blast wave hit me like a wall. I was thrown backward, slammed into the tunnel wall, my camera flying from my hands. Rock and dust rained down, timbers cracking and splintering. Men were screaming now, the frozen moment broken, panic spreading through the tunnel. They were running toward the entrance, toward me, toward escape. But the tunnel was collapsing behind them, chasing them, swallowing them. I ran, stumbled over debris, over men who'd fallen, over timbers that hadn't been there seconds ago. The entrance was ahead. I could see daylight, just had to reach it. Something grabbed my ankle. I looked down. A man, half buried in rubble, face twisted in pain and terror. He was looking right at me, seeing me, his mouth forming words I couldn't hear over the roar of the collapse. Then rock buried him completely. I made it out. Burst from the mine entrance into daylight, fell to my knees, gasping. Behind me, the mine was collapsing, the entrance filling with rock and dust. Then silence. I turned around. The entrance was sealed. Concrete and steel bars, solid and weathered, like they'd been there for decades, like it had never opened. My camera was still in my hand. I don't remember grabbing it. I checked the footage. The screen showed static. No video of the mine interior, no men, no explosion, just white noise. But the timestamp was there. I'd been inside the mine for 17 minutes. It was now 7:04 a.m. I went back to my camp, or tried to, but I couldn't find it. I walked the path I knew I'd taken, past the tipple, past the superintendent's house, but my tent wasn't there. I circled the area, growing more frantic. Finally found it right where I'd started looking. My tent, my gear, everything exactly where I'd left it. Except my sleeping bag was outside the tent, laid out like I'd been using it. And there were muddy footprints around the site. My footprints, from boots I was currently wearing. I checked my gear. Everything was there except my journal. I'd had it in my tent, my research notes for the past 6 months, all my documentation about the 1924 disaster. It was gone. I searched everywhere, tearing through my pack, checking every pocket. Nothing. Like it had never existed. That's when I heard the whistle again. 6:47 a.m., my phone said, but I'd just been through 6:47 a.m. It couldn't be the same time again. I looked at the date, March 8th, but it had been October when I'd gone to sleep. My phone was showing March 8th, 1924. The panic hit me then. Real, deep panic. I was stuck in something. Some kind of loop or replay, the mine disaster playing out over and over. I packed my gear frantically, didn't care about organization, just threw everything in my pack and started hiking out. The trail up was steep, 800 feet of climbing, but I pushed myself, needed to get away from this place. Except I never reached the top. The trail just kept going, switchback after switchback, but the elevation never changed. I climbed for an hour, should have reached the rim, but I was still in the gorge. And when I looked back, I could see Kaymoor below me, the exact same distance as when I'd started. I was climbing but not ascending, moving but not leaving. I tried going down. Maybe if I reached the bottom of the gorge, followed the river out. But the same thing happened. The trail went down and down, but I never got any lower. The mining complex stayed at the same distance, always visible, always watching. The whistle blew again. 6:47 a.m. Still, March 8th, 1924. And I realized I could hear them, the men in the mine. Not just machine sounds, but voices calling for help. We're trapped. Someone help us. It's collapsing. We can't breathe. 40 voices, 40 men dying, calling out from underground. And they were calling my name. Mixed in with their cries for help, they were shouting, "Duke, Duke, help us." I covered my ears, but I could still hear them. The voices weren't just coming from the mine. They were coming from everywhere, from the ground beneath my feet, from the rock walls of the gorge, from inside my own head. And underneath it all, that rumbling, that sound of rock shifting and collapsing getting closer. I don't know how long I wandered. Time stopped meaning anything. The whistle would blow, the disaster would play out, and I'd be back at some version of the beginning. Sometimes I was in my camp. Sometimes I was on the trail. Once I was inside the mine at the moment of the explosion. That time I felt the rock bury me, felt my lungs fill with dust, felt myself dying with the 40 men. Then I was back in my camp, gasping for air I could breathe. The only thing that changed was the voices. They got more insistent, more desperate. They didn't just want help anymore. They wanted company. They wanted someone to join them, to be part of the disaster, to be one of the 41. Stay with us, Duke. You understand our story. You can tell it from the inside. You can be part of history. I finally broke free by doing the one thing every instinct told me not to do. I went back into the mine. At 6:47 a.m., when the whistle blew and the entrance opened, I walked in. But this time, I didn't observe. I picked up a shovel I found near the entrance, and I started digging, not away from the collapse, toward it, into the rubble where the men were buried. I don't know why it worked. Maybe because I was trying to help instead of just document. Maybe because I was acknowledging their deaths instead of treating them as historical data. But as I dug, the voices changed. They stopped calling for me to join them. They started saying thank you, saying goodbye, saying they could rest now. When I looked up, the mine was empty. No workers, no lights, no sounds of machinery. Just an old sealed entrance and morning sunlight. My phone showed October 23rd, 2017, the right date. I was back in my own time. My journal was in my tent, right where I'd left it. I hiked out that day and never went back. The footage from my camera showed 17 minutes of static, but the audio worked. You can hear the voices, the collapse, the men calling my name. I submitted it to the Historical Society, but they dismissed it as imagination or stress-induced hallucination. But I know what I experienced. Kaymoor isn't just a historic site. It's a trap, a loop, a piece of March 8th, 1924 that refuses to end. Those 40 men are still dying in that mine, still calling for help, still trying to pull anyone who listens into their eternal moment of death. And if you're not careful, if you stay too long, if you listen too closely, you'll join them. You'll become part of the disaster, another voice calling for help that will never come. The HauntedFears horror family knows that some tragedies are so powerful they create their own gravity, pulling in anyone who gets too close. Stay with us, because our next story proves that the past doesn't just haunt buildings and mines. It haunts everyday places we never suspect. Can you explain buying groceries from a store that burned down 70 years ago, but you still have the receipt in your pocket? My husband and I can't, and that receipt is the only proof we didn't imagine what happened on that mountain road. My name's Holland, and this happened to me and my husband Brock in November 2016. We were driving from Roanoke to his sister's place in Lexington, taking the back roads through Virginia because Brock hates interstate driving. Says it's boring, that you miss the real America on the highways. I usually don't mind, but that night I wished we'd taken I-64 like normal people. It was around 9 p.m. when the car started making noises. Bad noises. Grinding, clanking sounds from under the hood that got progressively worse. Brock, who knows exactly nothing about cars, kept saying it was fine. We'd make it. We didn't make it. The engine died completely on a narrow mountain road somewhere near Trammel, Virginia, a town so small I'd never heard of it. No cell signal. Of course there wasn't. We were in a valley between ridges, the kind of place where radio stations fade to static, and GPS tells you it's lost. Brock tried the car a few more times, turning the key while the engine clicked uselessly. Nothing. We were stranded on a dark mountain road with no way to call for help. We could walk, I suggested, looking at the empty road stretching in both directions. Had to pass through a town to get here. Can't be more than a few miles back. We locked the car and started walking, using our phone flashlights to see the road. It was cold for November, our breath visible in the beam of light, and the woods on both sides of the road were absolutely silent. No animals, no wind, nothing. Just our footsteps on asphalt and the sound of our breathing. After maybe 20 minutes, we saw lights ahead. Not street lights, warmer than that. The kind of light that comes from old incandescent bulbs. As we got closer, I could make out a building, a small store set back from the road about 30 feet. A sign above the door read Trammel General Store in hand-painted letters, and through the windows, we could see the interior was lit up, shelves visible. Thank God, Brock said, speeding up. They can let us use their phone, or maybe they know a mechanic. The store looked old, the kind of place that's been there forever and never quite updated. Wood frame construction, a covered porch with a bench, windows with genuine wooden frames. But everything was clean, maintained, lights on inside like it was open for business. A open sign hung in the window, though I couldn't imagine why any store would be open at 9:30 p.m. in a tiny mountain town. We pushed open the door, and a bell jingled above us. The interior was like stepping into the 1950s. Not retro-themed, actually old. The shelves were wooden with that worn look that comes from decades of use. Products were arranged neatly, but everything looked vintage. Glass bottles of Coca-Cola for 5 cents, bread wrapped in paper, not plastic. Cigarettes displayed openly behind the counter with prices like 25 cents a pack. Behind the counter stood a man, maybe 60 years old, wearing slacks and a button-up shirt with a bow tie. He was writing something in a ledger with an actual fountain pen. He looked up when we entered and smiled. "Evening, folks. Don't get many visitors this time of night. What can I do for you?" His accent was thick Appalachian, but there was something off about his voice, like it was coming from slightly the wrong direction. And his face, when I tried to focus on his features, seemed to blur at the edges, like I was seeing him through an old television screen. "Our car broke down about a mile up the road," Brock said. "We don't have cell service. Could we use your phone to call for help?" The man looked at us with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Phone's out, I'm afraid. Lines came down in the storm last week, and the telephone company hasn't been out to fix them yet. Busy time of year." He gestured around the store. "But you're welcome to wait here while I radio for help. Got a shortwave in the back. Can reach the sheriff's office in the county seat." "That would be great, thank you," I said, looking around the store while he disappeared through a doorway behind the counter. The more I looked, the stranger it got. Everything was from the wrong era. The products, the prices, even the advertisements on the walls were from the 1950s. One poster showed a smiling housewife promoting Lucky Strike cigarettes. Another advertised a community dance on November 12, 1951. "Brock," I whispered, "look at the dates on this stuff. Everything's from the 50s. He picked up a newspaper from a rack near the door. The masthead read Trammel Weekly News, and the date was November 8th, 1951. But the paper wasn't yellowed or brittle. It looked fresh, ink still sharp, paper still white and crisp. The man returned. "Sheriff says he'll send someone, but it might be a couple hours. Roads are tricky at night. You folks hungry? Got fresh bread, some cheese, cold drinks, on the house, seeing as you're stranded." We should have left then. Every instinct was screaming that something was wrong. But it was cold outside, we were tired, and the store was warm and lit. So we stayed. Brock got a Coke from the cooler, one of those old glass bottles that you needed an opener for. I got some crackers and cheese that the man cut fresh from a wheel. We sat on a bench near the front window, eating, waiting for help that I was increasingly sure wasn't coming. "You folks passing through?" the man asked, returning to his spot behind the counter, picking up his fountain pen. "Don't recognize you. I know most everyone in Trammel." "Just driving to Lexington," Brock said. "Took the back roads. Car gave out." "Back roads." The man nodded slowly. "People don't use these roads much anymore. Not since they put in the new highway. But the old roads, they're still here, still going where they always went." I looked out the window at our car parked across the road. Except it wasn't just our car anymore. There were others. A station wagon from the 1950s. A pickup truck from the same era, all parked neatly, all looking like they'd just arrived. I hadn't heard any engines, hadn't seen any headlights. They'd just appeared. "Brock," I grabbed his arm. "The cars. Look at the cars outside." He looked, saw what I saw. His face went pale. "We need to leave." "Oh, you can't leave yet," the man said, and his voice had changed. Still polite, still friendly, but with an edge to it now. "Haven't paid for your items. Can't let folks walk out without paying. Wouldn't be right." "How much do we owe you?" I asked, standing up, ready to throw whatever money at him and run. He consulted his ledger. "Let's see. 1 Coca-Cola, 5 cents. Crackers and cheese, 15 cents. That'll be 20 cents, please." Brock pulled out his wallet, fumbled for change. "We don't have coins. Can you break a 20? The man looked at the modern bill like it was alien. He held it up to the light, examined it, then set it down carefully on the counter. "This isn't right. This money isn't right. What year do you think this is?" 2016, I said. "It's 2016. November 2016. He shook his head slowly. No. It's 1951. November 8th, 1951. You've got your dates confused. Probably from the stress of your car trouble." He pushed the 20 back toward us. "Tell you what, I'll put it on your account. You can pay next time you're through. Name." "We're leaving," Brock said, grabbing my hand. We headed for the door. "But you haven't paid," the man called after us. "The ledger needs to balance. Everything needs to balance." We ran. Out the door, down the porch steps, onto the road. Behind us, I heard the bell jingle again, heard the door open. Footsteps on the porch. "You'll have to come back. The account needs settling. Everyone settles their accounts eventually." The cars were still there. Vintage vehicles that shouldn't exist, all dark and empty. We ran past them, back the way we'd come, toward our broken-down car. The store's lights were still visible behind us, and I could see figures now, standing on the porch watching us. Not just the shopkeeper. Others. Men in old suits, women in dresses from the 50s, all standing there, all watching. We reached our car. Brock tried the ignition without any hope, and the engine turned over. Started perfectly, like nothing had ever been wrong with it. We didn't question it. He threw it in gear, and we drove, fast as we dared on that narrow mountain road, not looking back, just getting away from whatever that place was. We didn't stop until we reached a gas station on the outskirts of Lexington, 40 miles away. It was after midnight. We sat in the parking lot under the fluorescent lights, both of us shaking, trying to process what had happened. Brock checked his wallet. The 20 was gone, but in its place was something else. A receipt. The receipt was on old paper, the kind that's thin and tears easily. Written in fountain pen ink, it said, Trammel General Store, 1 Coca-Cola, $0.5, crackers and cheese, $0.15, total, $0.20, paid in full. Thank you for your patronage. At the bottom, in smaller writing, please visit us again. We're always open. The date on the receipt was November 8th, 1951. We went back the next morning. Couldn't help ourselves. Needed to see it in daylight. Needed to prove we hadn't both gone crazy. Found the road, found approximately where the store should have been. There was nothing there. Just forest. Old-growth trees that had clearly been standing for decades. No clearing. No foundation, no sign any building had ever existed. But I did some research when we got home. Found old newspaper archives online. Trammel General Store had been a real place, operated by a man named Lee Davidson from 1932 to 1952. The store burned down on November 9th, 1952, with Lee inside. The fire started around midnight, cause unknown. Lee's body was found behind the counter, fountain pen still in his hand like he'd been working on his ledger when the fire started. The last entry in his salvaged ledger, according to the news report, read, Balance must be maintained. All accounts must be settled. Store will remain open until every debt is paid. We still have the receipt. It's in our safe deposit box now because regular storage made it disappear twice. Once from a drawer in our house. Once from a fireproof box in our closet. It always came back, though, in random places. Brock's jacket pocket, my purse, between pages of books we were reading, like it wants to be found, wants to remind us of what we owe. Because I'm not convinced we paid in full. The $20 bill vanished, but that was our money, our time period. The receipt says paid in full in 1951 currency, but does that count? Did we actually settle the account? Or is it still open, waiting for us to return and balance the books properly? Sometimes, late at night, I hear it. A bell jingling, like the one that hung above the store's door. And I smell it. That particular combination of old wood and lamp oil and tobacco that filled the Trammel General Store. And I wonder if we ever really left, or if we're still there, on November 8th, 1951. Forever trying to pay a 20-cent debt with money that won't exist for another 65 years. The HauntedFears horror family knows that some debts transcend time, and some stores never really close, no matter how long ago they burned. Stay with us, because our next story takes us from the past, refusing to die, to something even stranger. Places where reality itself breaks down, and the rules stop applying. What's your move when you find your own backpack inside a cabin in the woods while you're still wearing it? I made the wrong choice, and I've been paying for it ever since that October day in Monongahela National Forest. My name's Nomi, and I'm an experienced solo hiker. 29 years old, been hiking since I was 15, done sections of the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest, trails across 3 continents. I know how to read maps, use a compass, handle myself in the wilderness. I'm careful, methodical, prepared, which is why what happened in West Virginia doesn't make any sense, why I can't explain it, why I still check my GPS obsessively every time I'm on a trail. It was October 12th, 2019. I was hiking a section of trail in Monongahela National Forest that I'd researched thoroughly. 10-mile loop, moderate difficulty, well marked according to every source I'd found. I started at the trailhead around 8 a.m. Weather was perfect. Visibility was clear. I had my GPS, my physical map, my compass, plenty of supplies. Everything by the book. The trail was beautiful. Dense hardwood forest, leaves turning colors. That perfect autumn temperature where you're warm while moving but not sweating. I passed a few other hikers in the first hour, exchanged pleasant greetings, everyone enjoying the day. By 10 a.m., I was about 4 miles in. Hadn't seen anyone for the last hour, but that was normal for a weekday hike. That's when I saw the trail marker. It was different from the others. The official trail markers were blue blazes painted on trees, consistent and easy to follow. This one was carved into the bark, an arrow pointing left, off the main trail. Below the arrow was a symbol I didn't recognize, something like an eye with lines radiating from it. Old carving. The bark had grown around it, had been there for years. I checked my map. Nothing showed any side trail in this area. My GPS confirmed I was on the main trail, and there shouldn't have been any branching paths. But there was clearly a trail leading left, faint but visible, and it had that marker. Curiosity got the better of me. I took a photo of the marker with my phone, noted my location on GPS, and followed the side trail. Just to see where it went, I told myself. I'd turn back if it went more than a quarter mile. The trail was narrow, overgrown in places, but someone had definitely used it. I could see where feet had worn the path, where branches had been broken back. Every 100 feet or so, there was another carved marker. Always the same symbol, always pointing forward. After about 15 minutes, maybe half a mile, I reached a clearing. In the clearing were structures, not modern, not recent. Stone circles like small rings of standing stones, maybe 3 feet tall. Wooden frameworks that looked like they'd been built for some purpose I couldn't determine. And trees, dozens of trees around the perimeter, all with symbols carved into them. Not just the eye, symbol, but others. Spirals, geometric patterns, things that looked like writing in a language I didn't recognize. My instincts were screaming at me to leave, but I'm a documenter. I photograph everything, record everything. It's part of why I hike, to see places and capture them. So I pulled out my camera and started taking pictures. The stone circles, the wooden structures, the carved trees. Everything carefully documented. That's when I saw the cabin. It was set back from the clearing, maybe 50 feet into the tree line. Small, one room, looked old but maintained. The wood wasn't rotted, the roof was intact. Smoke was coming from a chimney. Fresh smoke curling up into the autumn air. Someone was there. Someone was living in this unmarked spot deep in the national forest. I should have left then, should have turned around and gotten back to the main trail. But I needed to know who, why, what this place was. So I approached the cabin. The door was open. Not standing wide open, but ajar, like someone had just gone inside and hadn't bothered to close it completely. I knocked on the doorframe. Hello? Anyone home? No answer. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. I pushed the door open wider and looked inside. The interior was sparse, but lived in. A cot with blankets, a small table and chair, a wood stove with a fire burning low. Shelves with supplies, canned food, water bottles, all normal camping stuff. And on the table, sitting in the middle, was a backpack. My backpack. The exact same model, the exact same color, with the exact same patches I'd sewn on. My university patch, my trail patch collection, a small tear on the left strap that I'd been meaning to repair. I looked down at my shoulders. I was wearing my backpack. I could feel its weight, could see the straps. But there it was on the table too, impossible as that was. I stepped inside, walking slowly toward the table. Reached out and touched the backpack. It was real, solid, not a hallucination. I unzipped it. Inside were my things, my extra clothes, my food supplies, my first aid kit. Everything exactly as I'd packed it that morning. I heard footsteps behind me. Spun around. A woman was standing in the doorway. She looked maybe 40, wearing hiking clothes from a different era, old-style boots and a canvas jacket. Her face was strange, features slightly wrong in a way I couldn't pinpoint, like looking at a photograph that had been subtly altered. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice had an echo to it, like it was coming from further away than she actually was. "This isn't your trail." "I just followed the markers," I said, backing away from the table. "I didn't know this was private property." "It's not about property. It's about paths. Some trails go forward, some go sideways. You took a sideways trail, and now you're here instead of there." She gestured at the backpack on the table. "That's the you who stayed on the main trail. The you who didn't follow the markers. The you who got home safe." I didn't understand what she was saying, but terror was flooding through me now. "I need to leave. I need to get back to the main trail." "You can try," she said, stepping aside from the doorway. "But sideways trails don't lead back. They lead further sideways, into places that branch off from where you were supposed to be. Every choice that takes you off the path creates a new path. And the further you go, the harder it is to find your way back to the original." I ran, past her, out of the cabin, back toward the trail I'd followed into the clearing. She didn't chase me, just stood in the doorway watching. I found the path, started running along it, following the carved markers backward, toward the main trail, but the markers started changing. The eye symbol was still there, but new symbols appeared. Spirals, crosses, things I hadn't seen on the way in. The trail forked. I didn't remember any fork. I took the right path, the one that seemed more worn. It led to another clearing, smaller than the first, more stone circles, more carved trees, and another cabin, identical to the first. Smoke coming from the chimney, door ajar. I didn't go near it. I turned back, tried the other fork. It led to a stream I hadn't crossed before. The trail continued on the other side, markers still visible. I waded through the stream, cold water soaking my boots, and kept going. The trail wound through dense forest, climbing slightly, then descending. I passed more markers, more symbols, kept moving, desperate to find something familiar. After what felt like hours, I burst out onto what looked like the main trail. Blue blazes on trees, proper trail markers, wide path. I checked my GPS. It showed me exactly where I'd left the main trail, like I'd never moved. Like I'd been standing in one spot the entire time. But my watch showed it was 4 p.m. 6 hours had passed. I hiked out fast, didn't stop, didn't look back. Reached the trailhead at 6 p.m. Got in my car, drove straight to a hotel in Elkins. I didn't go home that night, couldn't face being alone. I stayed in the hotel, all lights on, checking my backpack obsessively, making sure it was real, that I had it, that there wasn't another one somewhere showing me a life I didn't live. The photos on my camera showed the clearing, the structures, the carved trees. All there, all documented, except for the cabin. Where the cabin should have been, there was just empty forest. And the woman, she wasn't in any of the photos, even though I'd taken several after she appeared. But there was one photo that terrified me. The last photo, taken automatically by my camera's timer function. I hadn't set a timer, but there it was, timestamp showing 3:47 p.m. The photo showed the main trail, the exact spot where I'd left it to follow the markers. And in the photo, standing on the trail, was me, wearing my backpack, looking at something, off trail with an expression of curiosity. The moment before, I made the choice to follow the carved markers, except I took that photo at 3:47 p.m., which was hours after I'd already made that choice, hours into my experience on the sideways trail. How could the camera capture a moment that had already happened? Unless that moment was still happening somewhere, a version of me still standing there, still making the choice, still creating new branches of paths that lead sideways from the main trail. I reported what I'd found to the Park Service. They searched the area I'd marked, found nothing. No clearing, no stone circles, no carved trees, no cabin. The trail I'd described didn't exist on any of their maps or surveys. They suggested I'd experienced some kind of disorientation, maybe mild hypothermia causing confusion, even though it hadn't been cold enough for that. But I have the photos. The structures exist in my camera even if they don't exist on that trail anymore. And I have something else. When I got home and unpacked my backpack, I found something that hadn't been there before. A small carved wooden marker, the same symbol from the trees, the eye with radiating lines. It was tucked into a pocket I never use, wrapped in paper. The paper had writing on it. Every trail splits. Every choice creates a branch. You found one branch. There are infinite others. Some versions of you took them. Some versions of you are still taking them. Some versions of you never made it back. Be grateful you're the one reading this. The others aren't so lucky. I don't solo hike anymore. Can't trust trails. Can't trust markers. Can't trust that the path I'm on is the path I'm supposed to be on. Sometimes I look at my GPS and it shows me in two places at once. Just for a second, just a flicker. One dot where I'm standing, another dot somewhere else, somewhere I didn't go, somewhere a different version of me went instead. And sometimes, late at night, I see her in my dreams. The woman from the cabin. She's standing at the entrance to trails I've never hiked, trails I'll never hike, and she's beckoning. Come see what happened to the other yous, she says. Come see where the sideways trails lead. Come see all the choices you almost made. I keep the wooden marker in a locked box. I've tried to throw it away 3 times. It keeps coming back, appearing in my pockets, my bags, my car. A reminder that some trails don't end when you walk away from them. They just keep going, with or without you, creating endless branches of paths that split off from every choice you make or don't make. The HauntedFears horror family knows that every trail has paths you can't see, and some choices lead to places you can never leave, even when you walk away. Stay with us for our final story, because what comes next will show you that some horrors don't just haunt places, they haunt every version of reality itself. How do you process finding modern smartphones in locked asylum rooms that haven't been used since 1985 and hearing someone singing in the next room? I processed it by running, but what I left behind in that building still calls to me every night. My name's Carmelo, and I'm an urban explorer, not the YouTube type looking for clicks, the serious type. I document abandoned structures for historical preservation, work with architectural societies, photograph buildings before they're demolished. It's legitimate work, and I'm good at it. But after what happened at the old Ridgeview Psychiatric Hospital in southeastern Ohio, I don't explore anymore. Some places should stay forgotten. Ridgeview was built in 1889 as the Athens Lunatic Asylum, one of those massive Victorian institutions that warehoused people society didn't want to deal with. At its peak, it housed over 2,000 patients. By the 1980s, new medication and changing attitudes emptied the place out, and they closed it in 1985. Most of the complex was demolished, but one wing remained, scheduled to come down in October 2020. That's where I came in. I got permission from the demolition company to document the interior before they tore it down. September 2020, 3 weeks before the scheduled demolition, I arrived on a Tuesday morning with my camera equipment, my measuring tools, my documentation forms. Professional, prepared, experienced. I'd done this 100 times. The wing was 4 stories, isolation and treatment rooms mostly, built in 1923 as an addition to the main hospital. Brick construction, small windows with bars, the kind of place that looked oppressive even in full daylight. I started on the ground floor, working my way up, photographing everything systematically. Empty rooms with peeling paint, abandoned furniture, medical equipment left to rust. Standard abandoned asylum stuff. The second floor was more interesting. The rooms here still had patient belongings scattered around. Clothes, books, personal items that should have been cleared out in 1985 but weren't. I photographed everything carefully, noted locations, tried to treat these forgotten lives with respect. In one room, I found a journal, pages filled with neat handwriting describing daily life in the institution. The last entry was dated October 15th, 1985, the day before the wing closed. The third floor was where things got wrong. The stairwell door was locked, which shouldn't have been the case. The demolition company said all doors would be open for my access. I had to use a crowbar to force it, and when I got the door open, the air that came out was wrong. Not just stale, but cold, and it smelled like antiseptic. Fresh antiseptic, like someone had just cleaned the floor. The third-floor hallway was different from the ones below. The lights were on. Not all of them, just the emergency lighting, those battery-powered units that glow green. Except this building hadn't had power in 35 years. There shouldn't have been any functional lighting, but there it was, casting everything in that sickly underwater glow. I walked down the hallway, slowly, camera recording everything, documenting the impossible. The doors were closed, unlike the floors below where everything stood open. And I could hear something. Music, faint and distant, coming from somewhere deeper in the wing. Old music, like from a radio, playing songs from decades ago. I tried the first door. Locked. The second locked. The third door opened, and I wish it hadn't. Inside was a patient room, but it was occupied. Not by a person, but by belongings. Recent belongings. A smartphone on the bedside table, still plugged into a charger that was plugged into a wall outlet that shouldn't have had power. The phone screen was dark, but when I picked it up, it came on. Battery at 78%. The date showed September 22nd, 2020. Today's date. The phone's home screen showed apps I recognized, social media, messaging, all current. I opened the photos. The most recent was dated yesterday. It showed this room, this exact room, taken from where I was standing. And in the photo, sitting on the bed, was a person. Young woman, maybe 25, wearing modern clothes, looking at the camera with an expression of confusion and fear. I dropped the phone. It clattered on the floor, screen still glowing. I backed out of the room and moved to the next open door. Another patient room, another phone, another set of recent belongings. Modern clothes draped over a chair, a backpack with a water bottle and protein bars inside, a wallet with an ID. The ID showed a man named Yahya Thompson, age 32, address in Columbus. The ID was issued 3 months ago. I started trying other doors, forcing them open with my crowbar. Every room was the same. Recent belongings, modern electronics, personal items from people who shouldn't have been here. 7 rooms, 7 different people's possessions. All recent. All showing signs of occupation within the past few days or weeks. That's when I heard the singing. A woman's voice, clear and beautiful, coming from the end of the hallway. Singing a song I didn't recognize, in a language that might have been German, or maybe something older. The voice was coming from the hydrotherapy room, according to the faded sign on the wall. I should have left. Every instinct screamed to get out. But I had to know, had to document, had to understand what was happening in this place. I walked to the end of the hallway, camera still recording, and pushed open the door to the hydrotherapy room. The room was large, tiled floor, and walls, with 4 old hydrotherapy tubs against one wall. The kind they used for treatment, back when they didn't understand mental illness, just dunked people in ice water and called it medicine. The tubs were filled, not with water, with something darker, thicker, and the surface of the liquid was moving, rippling, though nothing was disturbing it. The singing was coming from inside one of the tubs. I walked closer, knowing this was insane, knowing I should run but compelled forward anyway. I looked into the tub. There was a woman's face just beneath the surface of the dark liquid, eyes closed, mouth moving, singing that strange song. Her features were distorted, stretched, wrong, like looking at a reflection in moving water, but the water wasn't moving, and this wasn't a reflection. Her eyes opened. They fixed on me, and I saw recognition there, and hunger, and desperate need. Her hand broke the surface, reaching for me, fingers too long, joints bending wrong. I stumbled backward, and the singing stopped. All 4 tubs started rippling now, hands emerging from all of them, reaching, grasping at air. I ran, back down the hallway toward the stairs, my camera bouncing against my chest, my breath coming in panicked gasps. Behind me, I could hear doors opening, all those locked patient rooms, hinges squealing, and footsteps, lots of them following me, not walking, running, chasing. I hit the stairwell door at full speed, bounced off it, it wouldn't open. Pushed harder, nothing. Looked back. The hallway was full of them. Shadows, figures, shapes that might have been people once but weren't anymore. All moving toward me, all wearing hospital gowns from different eras, all reaching for me with hands that had too many fingers or not enough. The observation window. Every isolation room had one, small reinforced glass window for staff to check on patients. I ran to the nearest room, threw myself against the window. It cracked but didn't break. Hit it again with my crowbar. The glass shattered outward. The drop to the second floor was maybe 12 feet. I didn't hesitate, just dove through, landed hard on the floor below, felt something in my ankle give way. I crawled, then limped, then ran as best I could to the ground floor. The main entrance was still open. I made it outside, into the daylight, into the real world, and collapsed on the grass. Above me, in the third floor windows, I could see them. Dozens of figures, all pressed against the glass, all watching me leave. When I checked my camera later, most of the footage was corrupted. Static and digital artifacts. But 3 frames survived. One showed the hallway with its green emergency lighting. One showed the first patient room with the smartphone on the table. And one showed the hydrotherapy room. In that frame, you could see all 4 tubs. And in each tub, you could see a face just beneath the surface. And in the corner of the frame, barely visible, you could see me taking the photo. But there was something behind me in the reflection on the tile wall. A figure, tall and thin, wearing a white coat, reaching for my shoulder. I reported everything to the demolition company and the Historical Society. They were skeptical until I showed them the photos of the modern belongings. They searched the third floor. Found nothing. No phones, no clothes, no personal items. Just empty rooms with peeling paint and broken furniture. But they did find something else. Handprints on the inside of the observation windows. Dozens of them, fresh, made in some kind of dark residue they couldn't identify. The demolition was delayed. They brought in forensic teams, dogs, searched for evidence of the people whose belongings I'd photographed. Found 2 matches. Yahya Thompson, missing since June 2020, last seen hiking near the old hospital grounds. A woman named Malia Chen, missing since August 2020, her car found abandoned in the hospital parking lot. Neither was ever found. They demolished the wing 3 months later. I watched from a distance as they tore it down. When they got to the third floor, the wrecking ball hit something that made it bounce back. 3 times they swung, 3 times it bounced off like hitting rubber. Finally, they brought in explosives, brought the whole structure down at once. Even then, I swear I heard it. Screaming from inside the debris as the building came down. I don't do urban exploration anymore. Can't bring myself to enter abandoned buildings. Because I know now that some places aren't really abandoned. They're full, packed with people who went inside and never came out. People who got trapped between what the building was and what it became. And they're always looking for company. Always reaching for the next person who walks through their doors. Sometimes late at night, I still hear it. That singing beautiful and terrible calling me back. And I see her face in my dreams. That woman in the tub, looking at me with recognition like she knew me. Like she'd been waiting for me specifically. And I wonder if I really escaped. Or if part of me is still there. Still in that hallway with the green lights. Still walking toward that room at the end where something sings and waits for visitors who never leave. The HauntedFears horror family. We've journeyed through 11 of the most disturbing encounters the Appalachian Mountains have to offer. From hospitals that refuse to close to trails that lead to places that shouldn't exist. We've seen that these ancient mountains hold secrets that defy explanation. If these stories kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure you're subscribed to HauntedFears, because we bring you the most chilling true horror content every single week. Hit that like button if these stories gave you chills. Drop a comment telling us which one disturbed you the most, and join the Haunted Fears horror family for more terrifying tales from the dark heart of Appalachia. Remember, the mountains are always watching, and they never forget. Until next time, stay scared, Haunted Fears family.